So let's get into Snodgrass, or however you pronounce his name, this whistleblower. This is the smoking gun. So this is opdeepstate.com 2017. I guess this is no longer online either. Cody Snodgres, CIA whistleblower who refused to blow up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. Cody Snodgres, CIA whistleblower who refused to blow up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, United States, April 1995, gives his testimony on what really happened. Cody talks about the Clintons and the Bushes' involvement in drug trafficking in Iran-Contra, heroin trafficking out of Vietnam, Panama, 9/11, the FBI's tampering with the courts, and more. Judge Ed Nottingham, the CIA's judge of choice in the 10th Circuit, who participates in covering up the CIA and FBI's crimes, is also exposed. So here is the full interview of Snodgrass. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but... So this was Sage of Quay Radio Hour with Mike Williams. Special guest Cody Snodgrass, Black Ops, Oklahoma City and the CIA, 2017 fair use, obviously. And examining this for historical purposes. Still fair use. Look at all this fair use going on. Yep, fair use.
For 20 years. And he claims he was... And you need to be you.
Interesting tune here. Obviously, all fair use, all the time.
Now don't fret, baby.
I've heard Sage of Quay talked about a little bit, but not too much. Definitely not of the stature of Bill Cooper. Mark on the chat said, just went through hours of Columbine. Man, this one will never be solved. Too many people involved, too much testimony, too much information missing. I don't know. I think, call me crazy. Call me a gullible optimist. Lies have speed, but the truth has endurance. So I think in the end, all will be revealed. And I think we're on the path of that already. Just like with Oklahoma City here.
Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking. I'm your host, Mike Williams, and joining me as co-host for this show is my friend, Ole Damagard. Tonight, our guest is former independent Black Ops contractor Cody Snodgres. Cody was in the Black Ops business for over 20 years, and he claims he was offered $1 million by the CIA to bomb the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. The conversation with Cody was wide-ranging as he offers his personal experiences and insights into a world that very few people understand or can openly talk about. I'm sure you will find the information fascinating as we get a peek behind the CIA curtain. And so without further ado, here's a discussion with Cody Snodgres. Folks, we have a very, very interesting show today. Ole Damagard is going to co-host with me, and our guest is former Black Ops contractor Cody Snodgres. And Ole contacted me and asked me if I would have Cody on the show to talk about the business of Black Ops and his experience in that field of work. And of course, we want to know about that stuff because we hear the word Black Ops all the time, but most people really don't have an idea, an in-depth idea or understanding of what it really is, aside from what they portray in the movies and Hollywood and stuff like that. So today with this show, hopefully we're going to get into some of the deeper dives into what this business is all about. So Cody, thank you so much for coming on the show. And Ole, as always, it's good to see you again. So I guess to kick things off, Cody, I guess the question most people would ask up front is, how did you get into Black Ops and how long were you in? What was your specialty within Black Operations?
Well, I got into it, back in 1974. I graduated from high school in Farmers Branch, Texas, and I'd scored in the top 1% in the SAT test in physics going into college. and I had a full tennis scholarship too. And later in 1975, the CIA came to recruit me because of my test scores out of the physics department. And so I turned them down. I told them I did not want to work for the government. I wanted to be an independent. And so I began, I was already working with some Vietnam veterans that had come back from the war, and some of them had worked for CIA over there. And so they began training me in all kinds of things. And then over the next 20 years, I studied martial arts. I went to Japan briefly and studied over there. And so basically my specialty, I went to work on my master's degree in physics at Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas down there. And then I worked oil companies, Chevron, Amoco. That was my civilian front for the ops. But my specialty was, we did a lot of bodyguard work. We did a lot of moving of contraband, and I have some language skills and things like that. So we were just, black ops contractors. They used a lot of ex-military cutouts as well, people like the guys from Nam that come back and they're civilians, but then they take on these sensitive jobs, like the Murrah building or whatever, and the pay is really good.
Okay, so initially the CIA approached you because of your scores in high school and the SATs.
Right.
And you said, no good, I'm not interested. So what was the point in which you actually got connected in? So initially you said, no, I don't want to do this, but down the line you did get involved. So what was that moment in time? How did that happen?
Well, I was already in 1974. I had already, befriended some of these guys, and we were already doing things then, small things. And then as time went on, of course, the jobs got bigger and bigger. They realized they could trust me, and they kind of trained me and, took me under their wing and taught me all the military stuff. I mean, it's a lot better going to school because these guys just came from a battlefield, and they knew the stuff that really works out in the field. So they liked me because I had a perfect record, no traffic tickets, college degrees, jobs, and they said, you're the perfect guy to start out here in domestic ops to do things, because if you ever get caught, driving a load of something or doing something, there's no ties. There's nothing back. You're just a criminal, and they like that.
Okay, but did you realize at the time when you were getting involved in this that you were getting involved in something, or was it a process of where it was very incremental, where they started you off doing a small job and then it moved along slowly and the jobs got bigger? What I'm trying to get an understanding of is at what point did you realize, okay, I'm in?
There's not really a point like that. I mean, once you start that kind of stuff, you're already in. There's no point. What it does is it progresses, and as you're able to handle the assignments and stay alive, the idea is to complete the black op. A perfect black op is something that happens and no one on the outside knows that it's going on except the people that are in it. And if you can, complete the op and...
An interesting point there, like a lot of coincidence theorists, like they can't grasp that. They think if something is true, it's going to be blasted all over the news, all over the media, or that people outside of the op know about it, can report on it, blow the whistle, etc. Like, it's kind of a weird thing. It's like coincidence theorists have just this severe mental deficiency in not understanding compartmentalization. Like, you see it everywhere. See it like moon landing, whatever. It's like compartmentalization just doesn't register. Like, the mental deficiency is unique to not comprehending compartmentalization. You see it all the time, but it's just so basic. It's so basic. Sarah in the chat says, Columbine nearly drove me nuts when I was researching it. I didn't know what to think about it at all. Yeah, I think everybody goes through that once you do like an objective, logical deep dive. It's tough. I mean, this one's pretty crazy too, and more people need to talk about this one because, I mean, just the history of conspiracies. Like, it's almost like you have to go in order to understand the big picture, right? Especially, like, obviously you have to go way back further than Oklahoma City, but for like the modern era, like if you're talking, because Columbine, I've often referred to as Columbine as possibly the linchpin in the shattering of innocence and the descent into degeneracy, corruption, and collapse of the West. It's like that loss of innocence, but yeah, it probably started much earlier in smaller steps, and Oklahoma City might have been one of the bigger steps, one of the first big steps, and that's why we're going over it here.
Keep blowback from coming back to your principals, or the people who hire you, then that's what you get paid for. And if it gets messy and there's blowback, then you have to cover that blowback, and you have to have good sanitation skills and so forth. And so it's a progression. Some jobs are big, some are little, but after you develop a reputation, you know, in that field, more and more people come to you, or you get references, and they'll say, well, this guy's good, and he can get the job done, so they make an introduction, and that's how it's done. It's all under the table. No one likes any SIGINT, signal intelligence, or ELIN, electronic intelligence. All the meetings are done out in the woods or somewhere in a back cafe where there's no one to know about it.
Now, did any of the folks that you work with, did they identify themselves as working for the government, or was that something that just was left off the table? In other words, was there any process of identifying who was working for who when they were trying to bring you into a job or offering a job to you?
Yeah, no, most of the stuff in Black Ops, nobody wants any type of credentials or anything shown. If they're active military, they won't wear their uniforms. They'll just wear civilian clothes, and it depends on who you're liaisoning with. But no, there's nothing, no way. If there's any photographic intelligence or anything, someone's under surveillance, you go to a place and meet them. It's all done to minimize blowback in the future in case something sours up.
Were you aware of a chain of command over time? Did you start to understand?
And this is very curious. I mean, this is a very revealing interview here, just in general, on how Black Ops work, especially for coincidence theorists who don't know any of this stuff. And, I mean, it's logical, right? Like, to minimize the blowback, right? So nobody so he kind of mentioned at the beginning, people, like, Hollywood actually kind of sort of does get this right in a lot of movies. Because, I mean, that's one of the most perplexing things also. Like, some of these spy movies, they can be a little bit hard to follow, right? Because it's not perfectly outlined, but that's kind of how it is in real life. Because if you're one of these operators and you're brought in on a job, you don't necessarily know, like, the command. I mean, you only know, if your handler or whoever, whatever little information they give you, and that's it. You don't really know too much about all the other people involved, the people who ordered the op, even what agency ordered the op. Like, you don't know any of this stuff. Because if you did, you're a liability.
Where these various plays were in the pecking order?
Sure. After you get in so many ops and you start doing things, people, they take you into confidence, and they might say something like, oh, yeah, that guy works for the CIA, or that guy's an agent, but they don't want to get their hands dirty on this because the agents and case officers, they got their political careers to think about, and we're all expendable assets. That's why they hire us, is so that if something sours up, it won't go back to the case officers or the agents. And that way all the after-action reports that are filed with the station chief and up in Langley and all that, they can be doctored and altered to make sure that the appropriate fall guys take the blame for the blowback. That's just the game they play.
Now, were you ever concerned as you were going through this in your 22-year career that you were going to be the fall guy? Did you ever feel like, hey, you know what, I could be being set up for something?
Yes, on several times, and especially when they offered me the job to bomb the Murrah building for $1 million, I knew that was it. I mean, the hackles on my neck went up, and I knew for sure that was a patsy job, especially because of the low pay and everything. But there were several other times where we'd have crisscrosses like that, or there would be intelligence leaks, and you don't know at that point when you're out in the field if the intelligence leak is done purposely and they're trying to get rid of you and make you a fall guy, or it was an actual intelligence mistake.
Wow. Who else is mind shocked here? This might be one of the most revealing Black Op interviews I've ever heard. Like, this guy's dropping bombs, pardon the pun, or not really. This guy's dropping bombs on how it all works. And what's curious is you would think they would offer high pay, right? But they offer low pay for the patsy jobs. Interesting. And this guy's smart enough to know about intentional leaks. I mean, wow. Who's mind shocked by this interview so far? This is mind shocking me. And I'm not easy to mind shock. Eric Jones in the chat says, I remember on a Cops episode before the bombing, it showed an episode of guys that looked like McVeigh Nichols, and the third guy, never seen that episode again. What? I've never heard of this. Who else has heard of this Cops episode? This almost sounds like an urban legend. Do you know how long before the bombing it was broadcast? That's curious. This is going to turn into some, like, urban legend lore, like the missing episode of the Johnny Gosh America's Most Wanted.
And there was a leak somehow. So you really don't know that when you're out in the field. What you have to do is try to complete the mission regardless of those external parameters, and then, stay alive.
Did you wind up working with people that maybe initially you trusted, and then over time you realized that this person was untrustworthy?
Absolutely, Mike. That's those things do happen because people change. Like in, with Aldrich James, he was a station chief over in Moscow, and then the KGB turned him. Robert Hansen, 26-year counterterrorism guy, they turned him. There's times when people will sell you out behind your back for money. After you work in those jobs for a while, you do make some enemies, and they may try to go to your principals who are hiring you for a job and then go behind your back and then hire to set you up to get back at you. So there's all those things you have to watch. It's a real tricky business. It's not like being in the military.
Okay, so that leads me into, you mentioned the principals. Were you aware of what government or military entity Black Ops falls in under? In other words, who ultimately is calling the shots?
Yeah, we were generally told, they would mention something, they'd say, this is a company op, this is a sanctioned, CIA op, and we would be called in if that op went bad, then we'd be called in to, alter it or correct it in some way, and we were independents. Because when a black op goes sideways, even if it's a sanctioned op from whatever intelligence agency, another black op can be called in on top of it. They call it black on black. And they do that to minimize blowback. Because when you order an op and it's ongoing, things can change in the middle of it. And so they might have to cancel it or alter it in some way.
Yeah, as you were going through this, Cody, do you have a family? I'm assuming that if you do have a family, there was a lot of concern about the well-being, not only of yourself, but wife, kids, and so on.
Right. Yeah, I did at one point. I don't now. So I'm more free to talk. But we always worried that our families would be held if we were overseas or doing a job somewhere. What we generally did in the Black Ops community was have some of our principals or other guys that worked with that we could trust, and they would covertly watch our families for us. And so that way you didn't have to worry during your downtime, on a mission.
But Cody, your family, were they ever aware of what you were doing?
No, absolutely not. Not anyone in my family. A lot of the stuff we did was need to know, okay? And even myself, I didn't need to know certain things. All I needed to know was like pick up a load here, take it to this place, here's your contact, here's the code for that contact, and then walk away. And then all I had to do was contact my principals and say, okay, that I did my job. I didn't know where the load was going. I didn't know what the load was in. That, what was the load was composed of. Because if I got caught or tortured, then I couldn't divulge anything. And that gives the other guys that running the op time to clean the rest of it up.
Okay, so it was extremely compartmentalized. It was a need to know.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't have a broader understanding of what the mission was about. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. It depended on the threat level. It depended on how the security was. On lower level things, they might give me some more information because it's not as critical. But on real highly secret things, the compartmentalization really increases, and it's to protect everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one of the questions I've always had, Cody, with regard to what goes on with Black Ops is how much does the President of the United States actually know about the mission or what's going down? Are they aware up front, or is it something where they are also held in the need to know bucket? Your general experience in your career, did you get a sense that the guy sitting in the Oval Office was very much aware of what was going on before it took place, or was it more he was filled in afterwards?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like saying, how long is a string? You really can't answer it till you hold it in your hand and look at it. But it's just like an example is in that 1984, Congress passed that Bolin Amendment regarding Nicaragua. And as you recall, at that time, they had the Contras, which the Americans were supporting, and then the Sandinistas, which Daniel Ortega and the communists were involved with. But Reagan was worried that the balance of power would be changed and Nicaragua would fall and be communist, and the domino thing through Central America and then come up to Mexico and so forth. And he didn't like them operating in our the Southern Hemisphere, kind of like when Kennedy did the Cuban Missile Crisis. You can only put up with so much stuff. And so Reagan secretly went around Congress, and he ordered Director CIA to start up some ops to help fund and train those Contras. And I was involved in some of those ops later in Arkansas. But the president, when he orders something like that, he may have full operational knowledge and be calling the shots all the way down the line. Or he may just turn it over to CIA director and say, or give him a finding, presidential finding if there's assassinations involved. The president may know or he may not know. He may just turn it all over and say, here's what I want done. And you guys don't screw it up down there in Nicaragua and don't make a mess. We're going around Congress. So we want minimal blowback on this op. We don't want any political fallout because I've got an election coming up, in a couple of years or whatever. And if this stuff breaks out, then you're done. And so I think, I can't speak for individual presidents. I know people who have coffee in the White House with Clinton and Bush and Reagan, but I can't speak to that. There's a large number of ops that they have that are like the drone programs and things like that. And I would say that at some time they may have full operational knowledge and control, and other times they have minimal, just depending on the political climate at the time.
Can I just interfere and say, please remember who was vice president under Reagan? That's George W. Bush,
Exactly.
HW. And this guy, major player in all of this. Then came Clinton, who was also a major player, also with the things that Cody was involved in down in Arkansas and so on. So I think it also depends on what president we're talking about, because George Bush Sr. has, as soon as he sort of really came into position, he's been in this game and been aware of these operations.
Yeah, he was ex-director CIA in the 70s. And so if you were to ask me a question and say, like, well, if President George Bush Sr., you asked me that same question and name him specifically, my answer would be, since he was the ex-director of CIA, I would think he would tend to have more operational knowledge and be directly involved in these ops. But Reagan, he was an actor from California, and he's not quite the same, black ops mindset as the former DCI. And so, each president has his own thing, and it's hard to answer that question.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's pretty much like a circle when you think about it, because the president, in order for him to make decisions and to have a position, has to be briefed on what those positions should be or could be, right? I would assume that scenarios are presented to him. So it's interesting to me because let's just say the CIA would come in or the NSA would come in, one of the intelligence organizations, and they would fill the president in on what's going on and what is a possible course of action, what needs to be addressed and how we should go about it. So the president therefore makes a decision based upon input he's receiving from the very people that are putting the black operations into play, right?
Right, but those are the PDBs, the Presidential Daily Briefing. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand in the Black Ops world, Mike, is, let's say there's an op ordered and there's something going on out in the field, okay, and the operatives are out there doing it, and the operatives may have a side op going on that their principals don't know about.
Okay.
And so, anyway, what happens is when field reports are made and everything gets back up into the government chain, because we operate outside of the government a lot of times. Some of them are sanctioned ops, some of them aren't. And so when it gets back into the government chain of the case officers and the paid assets and all that stuff, they all file their after-action reports and stuff, and then they usually go to the CIA station chief in the area. And he's running all these parallel ops and umbrella ops, and one team doesn't know what the other one's doing and so forth. It's his job to correlate that intelligence and then send it on into Langley. Then from Langley, it has to be processed, and from there, the analysts put it together and they form that PDB you're talking about, the Presidential Daily Briefing. But what I'm saying is there's a big disconnect from the field, where we operate, up through the chain of command. A lot of times the station chief will take out some politically sensitive stuff, or if some of his teams are running side ops in the area, he'll leave that out. He figures, well, they're going to make a little money extra besides what they get from their paycheck at Langley, and it's okay as long as we don't get blowback on the ops. And so what happens is there's an intelligence skewing that goes on. The higher up you go in the chain towards the president, the more times the intelligence is skewed, changed, altered, looked at, and then by the time it gets to the president, it may have very little resemblance to what's actually occurring out in the field.
This begs the question, so who's calling the shots? Is it the CIA running rogue?
Yeah, and you're trying to put an exact thing on something that's in a gray area. You're asking who's calling the shots. Sometimes it's the guys out in the field. Sometimes it's the case officers. Sometimes if it's real politically sensitive or nobody wants to get their hands dirty, the actual guys in the government will just say, look, here's a bundle of cash, here's a suitcase full of cash, here's what we want done. If you guys caught, you're on your own. We never heard of you. You're in some foreign country and you get picked up and they call the embassy and State Department, they go, we don't know the guy, he's just a criminal, we never heard of him. And so it just depends. There's not really an answer to that question. I mean, who calls the shots? Sometimes it comes straight from the top. Sometimes it's just the guys in the field. The idea is to get the job done with no blowback. A true black op occurs, everyone leaves the area, and then the people in the area really don't know anything happened. That's the perfect black op, but it rarely works that way.
Okay. No, it's actually the way you explained it, where we don't really know ultimately who's calling the shots. It speaks for itself. There
has to be plausible deniability. You have to leave room, Mike, between you and your principals.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just, go do an op and then drive straight to their house in the same car you were doing the op and then say, we want to get paid. I mean, sometimes there's time drops where, you do an op and you don't see the guy for 4, 5, 6 months. And then you have a time drop where you meet at a time and a place and then payment's made. And so that way, plausible deniability is always present for the higher-ups because nobody wants to get caught in this stuff. It's just like when Reagan ordered all that stuff in Nicaragua. He didn't want Congress knowing about that. He didn't want the American people knowing about it for the next election. And so they did all the Iran-Contra stuff, and every administration does this stuff. It's just they want to find people that can do it, get the job done, get their whatever their objectives are accomplished, and with zero blowback. That's the ideal black op.
Can I ask, Cody, would you say that the CIA is an agency for hire? that companies can go in and just rent it for their own purpose?
Well, I don't know, because that question is another question. The CIA is a big thing. I mean, it's multi-layered. There's a lot of different things to it, so you can't just call it one entity. A company may approach someone who they know is a CIA agent or have some dealings with them, and then they'll hire them and say, look, we want you to do something, blah, blah, blah. And then that guy can accept it as a rogue assignment. He may not be sanctioned by his higher-ups in the CIA, but if he's, say, in Belgrade or someplace, and he might run a little a side op, to work with the company to do something. But you have to be careful with that, because you can get set up real easy. And like I said, if there's blowback from your side ops, then the political career of the agent is over. It's not like an area where it's black and white, and if you look at it one way, there can be one answer to the question. And if you look at it another way, it might be another answer to the question. So like, what color is a car? You can say it's blue, or you can say it's purple blue, or you can say something. It doesn't matter. It's still the car. The idea is you don't want anyone to know what color it is. You see what I'm saying?
No, I understand. It's very interesting speaking to somebody who is on the inside on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is really fascinating, because the way he just explained that, I really wanted to let him go and kind of go over all of that. It's pretty consistent with pretty much everything that has been revealed thus far in declassifications and other whistleblowers, etc. And I do kind of want to just go on a super quick aside. It might not be super quick, but let's try to keep it super quick. So for those that have been following the Amy Lynn Bradley case, who disappeared off a cruise ship, something that never sat right with me. I mean, something that just seemed really off about the entire situation was Frank Jones, supposedly this independent contractor, a black ops guy, special forces guy, whatever. And he was kind of thrown under the bus. I wonder if he actually was legit, because, again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just all of this conversation about black ops and plausible deniability. I have a whole podcast on plausible deniability for the coincidence theorist groups that are new to this stuff. Something doesn't seem right. Like, if he was legit, and if Amy Bradley was connected to some, like, political individuals a la Epstein and his circles, and the government were protecting them, would they throw this guy under the bus and pretend that he's a con man? Because something just doesn't seem right about the entire Frank Jones situation. Because if he's just extorting funds, why would he go out and hire legit special forces guy? I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but he hired a whole team of legit special forces and military guys, ex-Navy SEALs and Rangers, etc., like legit verified guys. If you're a fraudster, why would you do that? Because those guys would easily be able to tell that you're not legit and blow the whistle on your whole thing, on your whole scheme. So none of it makes any sense. And the way the gullible goofs just lapped it all up, that he's just a con man, and just dismissed it. What Snodgres just went over here, this is exactly how plausible deniability works. And they say, oh, he's just some criminal, right? So yeah, I just wanted to do a quick aside there with Frank Jones and the Amy Bradley situation. And just ever since I went over that aspect, none of it made any sense. So yeah. And so a Marco in the chat saying Snodgrass the criminal traitor? What are you talking about? And again, before the coincidence theorists jump all over this with their cope, Snodgrass has obviously not admitted to have been CIA. I mean, how many people are? Like, if you haven't checked out the Steven Seagal series here on MINDSHOCK, over 30 hours of receipts of his claims, somehow Seagal is buddy-buddy with all these actual CIA guys. So there's very few CIA guys that are outed, so to speak. I guess it's because they were cleared to speak publicly as CIA guys. But either way, like, how would you know all of them? And so Seagal's a curiosity, because people say, oh, he never worked for the CIA, which I don't think he ever claimed to work for the CIA either. he said something like he worked with guys who worked with the CIA or something of that nature, like a freelancer, independent contractor, whatever. And for all the gullible goofs, like if you're the CIA looking to recruit in Japan, it's very possible Seagal was literally teaching some CIA guys martial arts. Because he's this renowned... I mean, think about how good you have to be as a Caucasian or whatever mix he is, as a non-Japanese, to teach Japanese. And he's fluent in Japanese, and he's doing security details in Japan for celebrities and all this. Like, he's dialed into that whole security scene, and a martial arts master, and fluent in that language. So, yeah, he's obviously somebody the CIA would be looking to recruit. Now, whether they did or didn't, that's a separate issue, but obviously he'd be on their list. So yeah, let's continue here, but so far quite mind-shocking. So Snodgrass has never been officially named. Not that he would be, right? If he's doing Black Ops, has anybody who's ever done Black Ops been named unless they were part of some kind of declassification or patsy type situation? So obviously 99.99999% of Black Op operators are never named or admitted as such. So it's kind of weird how coincidence theorists expect them to be. Like the Gopher is just off the charts. But based on his knowledge, if he really wasn't, this guy did some serious homework, because he seems to know exactly how all of this works.
And that's why a lot of my questions are geared toward
Sure.
what I have researched, and I'm guessing a lot of my listeners, how they're thinking of how this might work. So this insight is fabulous. The other question I had for you, Cody, is what has been the response so far from you coming out and talking about this stuff? Have you received any input or feedback from people in the government or the military, like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this? Maybe even some friends that you used to work with, pro or con? How has that been going?
Well, before we continue here, Marco's got an interesting question. How much money to sell out and go Black Operator? Well, here's the thing, though. Obviously, there are like mercenary Black Ops guys, and then there's Black Ops guys who actually think they're serving their country, right? Because if they think they're doing it for the greater good, even if they're, let's say, coloring outside the lines, if they believe it's for the necessity of saving the country, in their own minds, they're true patriots, right? They're not traitors. So there's different categories, right? There's the pure mercenaries, and then there's the patriots. So these are different categories, and let's not fall for false dichotomies. There might even be other categories, right? There might be just a bunch of psychotics who just like, if there's a chance to kill somebody or bomb somebody, they're all in. They don't give a crap if it's for a government. I mean, technically that would fall under mercenaries. But when you split the mercenaries, there's the psychotic sociopath mercenaries, and there's the just doing, that's just business. They don't necessarily enjoy killing people. It's just their job and they'll do it. And then there are the sociopaths, psychotics, and basically serial killers who do it. So there's a whole bunch of different categories here. GFUNP says they are actually persons licensed to kill. Yes, and there's different psychological profiles, and then of course there's the MK Ultra guys and all that. So there's very different categories here. There is one category that would consider themselves patriots.
Well, we've got like over 1,100 emails here. It's been going overwhelmingly well. I mean, I just got off the phone with the guy in Oklahoma that was in the infantry, and then he was a first medical responder at the Murrah building the morning it was bombed. And he called me and he said, "Thanks for standing up, and I got some info for you." We've been getting a whole lot of veterans, Marine Corps guys, different branches, sending in their stories. It's been overwhelmingly positive because so many people, Mike and Ole, that work in the U.S. military, they saw things in Vietnam, or they saw things in Bosnia, Iraq, wherever they were, Afghanistan, and they realized that there was a lot of dirty stuff going on, and our civilian press over here is just totally propagandized, and they're good-hearted people. They see what's happening in our country, and they want to do something. And they're trying to stand up against this overwhelming wave of corruption, they've been perpetrated by the Bushes and the Clintons and so forth. And so, yeah, it's been totally positive, completely positive. Just very few people. And then the main thing, Mike, is that they applaud me. You know, they try to put me on some kind of pedestal for being courageous and standing up. And to me, that's my job now, is to stand up and stand for the light and risk. You know, I put my life out on the line. That's fine, okay. But I'm not some housewife like Jennifer Flowers or you know, Monica Lewinsky. I'm a trained black operator, and they offered me the job to blow up a federal building. So if any people want to come out here and the Clintons want to hire a hit team or assassins or any of that, they're welcome to do that.
Also, keep in mind, he never went public until the Clintons moved out of politics. Or at least for the most part. Or, you know, mostly Bill. But, yeah, so he wrote books and everything, but, yeah, he did wait quite some time. So, if his story is legit. So, clearly he was afraid of something happening. Or I mean, I don't know when he said his last mission was. So he began doing public interviews 2017. So pretty much, I guess, after Hillary lost. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? That is interesting, right? Interesting.
But they may walk into something that they didn't plan on, because I'm not going to be suicided or like the rest of these civilians. I'm not a civilian. I am a trained black operator, and whoever they send might even be somebody I know.
Yeah, very interesting.
So the response is overwhelmingly positive. It's like, great, someone's finally standing up to this Clinton machine with 120 or 30 or 140 people on their dead list, and you know, they go to testify to the grand jury and they slip on a banana peel and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not one of them. I am ready to put my life on the line for the truth. I believe that America is a great country and we deserve to do that. So I do that and hopefully inspire others, like this guy that just called right before the interview, Mike, and he was telling me everything that happened at the Murrah building that day. He was the first guy. It's wonderful to see people, you know, finally standing up through this cloak of fear, because we're all afraid to talk. Everyone's afraid to say anything, you know.
Now, what made you come out, Cody, finally come out and talk about it? Why now?
That's a good question. I had sat on this story for quite a while, and I was just waiting for the time when Bill Clinton wasn't the president and Hillary Clinton, you know, wasn't in the Secretary of State, and we could get into a political climate where, you know, Trump's cleaning the swamp or draining the swamp, and they've got all these sealed indictments coming out now. And so I figured it would be the perfect time to step forward with this story of deep, deep corruption, not only in the CIA, but also in the 10th Circuit federal courts and the Department of Justice. So I thought it would be a good time to do this, because I've been carrying this burden for a long, long time. And it's poisoning my soul to know what I know and then sit and watch all these lies like the Clintons and all of them telling on TV. I mean, it just poisons your soul after a while. Now,
do you believe that the Trump administration is going to be able to drain the swamp, or do you think that that's just more smoke and mirrors?
I don't know. I think that he's trying, but the deep state exists, Mike and Ole. Ole knows a lot more than I about this, but the deep state, as you well know, ever since 1947, when Alan Dulles was director of OSS there, and before it was morphed into the CIA, that deep state's been going on a long time, and individual administrations come and go. And so this big apparatus with the NSA, the DIA, the NRO, CIA, all of them.
I mean, this guy knows a lot. Call him crazy, call him a fake, or whatever. This guy has quite a large body of knowledge. I don't know the last time I was this impressed by a whistleblower. Or alleged whistleblower.
It's a big, deep thing. And I don't know if one man can do it, even with the power of the presidency, because everything's been so corrupted, but I think there's a chance, and I support him if he can do that. It remains to be seen. I know if we don't do something, Mike, I think we'll probably all be microchipped, like dogs eventually, and fall in the New World Order plan, and freedom in America will just be gone.
Now, Cody, you mentioned that you had a lot of things on your mind from the point that you left. I guess that was around 1996. Is that when you left the Black Ops business?
No, I retired I was offered the job to bomb the Murrah building in 1994 in October, and I turned that job down. By that time, I had many broken bones, nerve damage. I had died twice in the hospital. I had severe PTSD, and I'd been drinking, to cover my PTSD. And I was getting towards the end of my career. I think that's one reason they offered me that job, because it was going to be a patsy job, and they knew it. And it would do two things. I would be the patsy, plus they would shut me up from everything I knew, because I didn't sign a national security oath. I didn't sign any of that stuff. I was in Black Ops out in the field, and I saw what happened on a lot of different things. And they can't shut me up. They can't threaten me with Leavenworth or hold a VA loan over me. And so I'm a rogue to them. And they can plant you with evidence or kill you, or they can threaten to hold your family over you. That's the only way they can shut somebody like me up. And so in 1995, in March, 1 month before the Murrah building went up, I didn't know when it was going to go up, but we had a retirement party up here, and several people flew their jets into the airport, and we had a big retirement party. And I said I was never going to go back to that. And they congratulated me and said, you made it all this time, and he did good, and now it's time to quit while you're still alive.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. So over the 22 years, Cody, what were some of the things that you were involved in where you said before, I think you said about damaging your soul or wanting to serve the light now, but what were some of the things that you were involved in that, as you look back now, you think to yourself, I can't believe I was involved in that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of them. We were involved in a lot of ops, just moving things. We moved weapons, we moved drugs in Centaur Rose in Arkansas. I was involved in bodyguard jobs. We had some jobs offered to us in Saudi Arabia over there for $50,000 a month for a 6-month lock-in to bodyguard some of those sheiks' relatives, nephews, sons, daughters, because they're always worried about kidnappers, and terrorists kidnapping them, because everybody knows the Saudis have money. And one of the things, like for instance, back in '88, was the Barry Sadler. That was September 8th of 1988, I believe, when Barry Sadler was shot down in Guatemala. He had been Special Forces in Vietnam, and he was a staff sergeant. Yeah, he took his SF training at Benning and 20th Special Forces Group back in '63 with Barry Sadler and all those guys.
So just a quick aside here, Steven Seagal also has verified security detail for certain Middle Eastern families, and there was even a situation, one of the only times he was challenged, and I went over all the receipts on the Seagal series, I'm not going to bring them up all right now, but there's even an interview with another bodyguard, some huge jacked guy, and he said they had a friendly challenge. I think Steven Seagal made him sign a release form, a waiver of liability, and Seagal hospitalized him, and then Seagal actually paid his hospital bills. And this was in a Middle Eastern news site. And we went over it in the Seagal series. But again, Steven Seagal, like many of these guys, do security detail in the Middle East and elsewhere as independent contractors and operators, Black Ops, Special Forces, etc. So again, with Steven Seagal, the people who just hallucinate, there's no way he could have ever been affiliated with anybody in the CIA. I mean, everything kind of lines up for him to have been. Now, maybe he wasn't. But everything lines up for him to have been. And, South to West in the chat says, I learned a long time ago with Steven Seagal, anything is possible. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Scott Hawkins says, is this guy still alive? If so, how? Yes, he's still alive. Very little information exists about him, though. Nobody knows where he even lives. And he sounds like he's pretty smart, so I don't know. Maybe he takes certain precautions. Jeff UNP says, Seagal was training forces right now or not? He was. I don't know what he's doing today, this second, but he has been training Russian forces in Ukraine. And I think they recently recaptured certain areas. Russia recaptured certain areas in eastern Ukraine. I wonder if those were specific troops that Seagal was training. But that's a subject for another time. All right, let's continue here.
And then he went over there, and a lot of people know him in the older generation. He stepped on a punji stick in Pleiku and got a bad infection at the Subic Bay Medical Facility. While we're recovering, he wrote The Ballad of the Green Beret back in 1965, and that went to a hit single. It was a #1 single in the United States in '65. But Barry was working down there in Guatemala on some arms deals, and the CIA was involved with some Canadians and stuff. His story's in the book, but they hired me to bodyguard him 2 weeks before he was actually shot.
And so if this guy's a fraud, this is the most knowledgeable fraud I have ever heard. I mean, we're just starting we're maybe a quarter of the way through the interview. I mean, this guy is incredibly knowledgeable about a lot, not just a lot of a lot of these obscure data points. And the way he's rattling them off, either he has the best memory ever, or perhaps he really was there and did those things.
And I was about to go down there, and a CIA assassin named Rosin, he had been in the Phoenix Project in Vietnam, and they, I guess, pulled him out of mothballs or something.
And he even knows about the Phoenix Project, which is crazy. And again, Steve, the connections here, the parallels to Seagal are just unrivaled here. Because Steven Seagal made nods to the Phoenix Project, not specifically with the brainwashing, but some of the torture techniques in Above the Law, as well as CIA drug trafficking, which had never been in a Hollywood movie before. Like, he's blown the whistle on so many things. And obviously the Illuminati propaganda campaign against him and all the Me Too stuff only started coming out of the woodwork out of nowhere right after his Piers Morgan interview, where he started blowing the whistle on the New World Order. So continuing on here.
And they want to get rid of Sadler for stepping on some toes. And so he was leaving a bar in Guat City down there in Guatemala and shot him in the back of the head with .380, and it didn't penetrate the skull. It went around the outside of his skull, between the skin and the skull, and exited by the eye.
And like the level of detail here, like if he's a fraud, like this is the most knowledgeable, well-studied fraud I have ever heard if he's a fraud. I mean, this is just incredible. Jeff UNP says he doesn't sound like he's BSing. Not at all. Like, the level of casualness in his voice discussing all these topics. Because a lot of questionable people, now maybe if, there's a lot of so-called whistleblowers. Some of them are, like, very animated and very excitable. And I don't know, maybe if they're telling the truth, it wouldn't be surprising if they went crazy and that's their new personality as a result. So that doesn't mean they're faking it. But this guy has a certain calm composure with all of this. I mean, it's interesting to say the least. Very interesting.
And he didn't kill him. He was in a coma, but he faked a coma. And they put him in a civilian hospital down there, in Guat City. And then one of my handlers, his name was Duke Flaglier. He was also Special Forces in Nam. And I say his name now because he died of Agent Orange cancer. We don't want to violate the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. We don't want to say any names of people that are active or compromise anyone's identity. But these guys are dead, so I can talk about them. And so anyway, they went down and rescued Barry. and he was with Ron Brown, the guy that runs the Soldier of Fortune thing, and they brought him up here to the States because they're afraid of another CIA assassin.
And how would he know all these guys' names and histories if he's a fraud? Unless you're arguing he's like a super rich guy that paid off all the legit people for this information and then passed it off as his own. That's a theoretical possibility. But yeah, he just rattles off all these happenings, locations, dates, names, and the history behind the name. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, this is an incredible interview.
Dressed up like a doctor or something, would give him a little shot in the hospital, finish the job, And so anyway, they bounced him around some safe houses up here in the States, and then he died over near Memphis. I believe his mother lived there in Tennessee, but that whole story's in the book, and a lot of people don't know what really happened. But in the Vietnam vet community, Barry Sadler was a household name back then at that time. A lot of the new kids today and soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're not familiar with that. But we were involved in a lot of things like that, assassinations and bodyguards. The perfect bodyguard, Mike, is a former assassin because they know all the tricks.
Yeah.
And so conversely, the best bodyguard makes a good assassin. So it's just a question on how you're going to turn your skills. And so I was offered a number of assassination jobs, which I did not take for various reasons. I tried to stay more on the bodyguard and the security aspects. Like if there was an op going on somewhere, then we would run security for the op members. And if they were doing an entry the DEA has a CLET team. It's called the Clandestine Laboratory Enforcement Team. A lot of people never heard of it. I got one of their patches here. They're real secret. They don't tell anyone in the DEA, even the regular agents don't know who these guys is, because they're the ones that go down to like the Ochoa brothers or the Medellin cartel or Pablo Escobar's cartel, and they go in the underground labs, and they hit the big coke labs or they hit the methamphetamine labs. And my girlfriend here, she had dinner with Pablo Escobar once down in Miami. But the thing with
the level of calm this guy has discussing this stuff, I mean, it's pretty incredible. Like, either this guy can really handle himself, or he's just a really incredible actor with an impeccable memory for all of these things. And his level of knowledge in all of these obscure, obscure details, non-public details regarding how all of these agencies operates, it's pretty interesting. Jeff says he talks about the agency with disgust. I suspect this is a case of a lot of people who go into the military, they're true patriots. Then when they find out everything that happened, it's slowly, like he says, it corrupts your soul. And that's why he had to come clean. Some people still have a conscience. Maybe not that many. But I wonder, he really didn't get into the psychological aspect of why he even got into all of this or whatever too much. I mean, he talked about it a little bit, but not really. I mean, it could just be as basic as money, right? A lot of people go to the military just because they can't really do anything else, and they just want the money to be able to live a life. And so perhaps there was a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, just really interesting revelations here and things that nobody has ever talked about. Scott Hawkins says this man is now a true patriot. And also, he says his girlfriend had dinner with Escobar. Now, see, that's such a wild claim. But how casually did he say it? So, again, when you're examining some of these so-called whistleblowers or people going public, there's a certain eagerness in their voice to be believed, and that's usually a tell that they're a fraud. When they're looking for approval to be believed, etc., this guy, there's not a single intonation of any of that. This guy sounds like he couldn't give one iota of a crap whether you believed it or not. It sounds like he's just doing his part to get it out there. And that's curious. Now, if his girlfriend had dinner with Pablo Escobar, that would suggest he's not in the U.S., right? So, I mean, I don't know if he would be safe to be in the U.S. Supposedly, he's from the Chicago area. Like, there's not a lot of info on him, which is also curious, right? Because if he really was just a random Joe Schmo who made all this up, he would have some kind of record somewhere, right? But if he's a black operator, you wouldn't expect to find, like, I can't find anything on this guy. So, I mean, unless you could also say, oh, well, he made up this name, but there is a record of someone his age graduating, I think, in Chicago, and then pretty much nothing. So yeah, he might originally be from the Chicago area, but then there's really nothing. Like, does he live somewhere in South America off the grid now? Maybe. I mean, I have no idea. His girlfriend had dinner with Pablo Escobar. I guess plausibly he could maybe be in Florida area, but, or is he on some island somewhere? Or in South America? Is that more likely? I think we'll never know, right? If he's good at staying alive, we'll never know.
The thing with it is we tried to provide security on a lot of things where there were operations going on, and the people would tell me, like in the CIA, they'd say, we're doing a CIA-sanctioned op, Cody, but I don't trust Langley. I don't trust my own guys. We may be walking into a trick bag or a setup. So they would come to me as an independent and go, look, Cody, I know I can trust you. I don't.
Like, just listen to the terminology. Either this guy's the most knowledgeable fraud ever, or he really was there and because there's a difference when somebody's trying to really dazzle people and fool them. Like, they really lay it on thick with the lingo. Like, they add pauses with the lingo as if to try to impress people. Oh, see, I know all the lingo. This guy just talks casually with all the lingo. And also, how terrifying is that situation? Like, the guys don't even trust Langley. Like, they don't even trust the government as their, which they shouldn't, right? But imagine if you're them, like, you're trying to do these operations, presumably for the benefit of the world, and stop these bad guys, etc. But you can't even trust your employer, the government that supposedly you're doing good, and obviously along the line, like, you know, they know the jig is up, right? I mean, look at Smedley Butler, right? So Smedley Butler wore as a racket. He didn't start out that way, right? He didn't start out knowing it was all corrupt, etc. He started out like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking like he was doing the right thing, and then you know, like all of us, right? I mean, how many of us as kids really thought the world was just so corrupt and horrible? I mean, maybe there was somebody. But it's weird. It's like when you learn, when you gain enough experience in just basic human psychology, like corrupt power centers and establishments, you know, that's a process. That's not like a light bulb, at like 4 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 15 years. It's just automatic, you know it all in the extent of corruption. No, it's a slow burn. It's a slow, painful burn.
Trust my own guys they stuck me with for this op. So we want you to, you know, to set up on it and guard the op. And so the CIA guys never knew we were there. And we would provide extraction if there was wounded or extra security in case the intelligence was bad. See, a lot of times you get intelligence, Mike, where they'll give you a file and they'll say, okay, here, there's only 3 guys in here and they've got light weapons and they don't have explosives and they don't have this and that. And then you realize the intelligence you got has nothing to do with the real world. And you walk into a meat grinder, and they've got 20 guys there with explosives and rockets and all kinds of stuff. And so you can see the kind of reason why they want to have auxiliary security.
How did you maintain your mental health and your sanity going through this? Because it would seem to me, Cody, that the stress is unbelievable. Was there a point in time when you were involved in this where it was okay? You know, it's all right, I don't mind doing this work. And then it evolved to a point where, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And if you got to that point, how far into the 22 years did you reach a point when you said to yourself, you know, this is not working for me?
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's several questions there. But, well, I had trained in martial arts, and I was ongoing through it. And we did a lot of meditation. Some of my teachers were Buddhist priests, on, you know, besides being martial artists.
Wow, this is giving me such Seagal vibes. So this guy's a martial arts master and Buddhist who meditates. I wonder if he knows Steven Seagal. At this point, I would not be surprised if this guy and Steven Seagal know each other. Let me see if I can find something on that.
And so we did a lot of real high-level meditation, real deep meditation and centering techniques. And like I said, later on, as I got towards the end of my career, the last 4 or 5 years, I started drinking a lot. I was having nightmares. In dreams, I would sleep with twin silenced MAC-10 machine guns in .45 caliber, one in each hand. I wired my own house with explosives. I had tripwires set up everywhere. I got extremely paranoid after, when you first start out.
This is the most fascinating interview I've ever heard. I mean, this guy's right out of a movie, but it kind of makes sense, right? Like, if you're that paranoid, that's what you do if you have that kind of security. I'm assuming that wouldn't be in the U.S., although obviously in certain rural areas, maybe Montana, Alaska, middle of nowhere, Texas, maybe you could do that on your property. And if you're a military contractor, you would have, all of the exemptions for explosives and full auto and all that. But yeah, no, I'm kind of leaning he's probably somewhere off grid in South America. But the fact that he would need this level of security, possibly not an island, although who knows, because again, if they know where you are, they can get you on an island too. But yeah, this is just so fascinating, isn't it? This is so fascinating. Jeff UNP says that's how he survived. Jason Bourne. If this guy is as skilled as he's saying, because again, some of these guys don't even get out alive. So if he's legit and if he's this old, he has to be good.
It's like little kiddie jobs and stuff, and then when you got into it and the jobs got deeper and bigger, the stress level, of course, went up. But I used to get up and run 5 miles in the morning, and I was in excellent physical condition. When I graduated from high school, I scored #1 on the Marine Corps physical fitness test in my high school. I was also the only 4-year letterman to graduate in my class of about 1,148 kids. So I was a very good athlete and highly intelligent, and I got double degrees in bachelor science degrees in mathematics and physics, and I worked. But anyway, the point is, I was under a lot of stress after I got out of graduate school. I worked for Chevron Geosciences in Houston, and then my front for the Centaur Rose Ops in Arkansas with the Clintons and them was over in Tulsa, Oklahoma at Amoco Production Company, and I was a petroleum and research geophysicist. I had about 19 people working under me. I was mid-management.
You know what's funny? I don't know if I've ever heard anybody rattle off their accomplishments like that without sounding like a narcissist, other than maybe Steven Seagal. This is just hilarious. Like, there was not 1 ounce of narcissism picked up in that verbal delivery. That's curious, because people brag about, I was this great athlete, even with, nothing behind it. They just have this, you can pick up the narcissism in their voice, and this guy has none. This guy's just matter-of-factly giving his history, and he sounds like he doesn't care whether you believe him or not, which is a sign that someone is not lying unless they're highly trained in deception.
We had stuff like the Boat for Sea project in offshore Alaska, Saudi Arabia, so forth, offshore Louisiana. So I worked those projects, but at the same time I was doing black ops. And that's why my principals loved me, because I had a really good job as a professional geophysicist. I had a perfect record. I had a perfect cover. We kept all the money perfect. So on the outside, it looked like I never bought anything extravagant. Everything was perfect. And that was a great civilian cover for an illegal domestic CIA op. And the stress, though, was incredible because I had to do all the mid-management stuff at the oil company and then run these ops at night. So I started breaking down after a while, and then eventually just decided, the money was too much, too great in the black ops. And so I left the oil company because I was only making like $50,000 a year, and that's nothing compared to what we were making on the other stuff. but the risk was a lot higher.
What was the money like, Cody?
I would average, I had a deal where they'd pay me $20,000 a month cash. That was just a base pay to hold, some months I didn't do anything, but, other months I'd get calls and we'd go do something. And we had like 4 bags packed, one would have white tape on it. That'd be if it was a cold Arctic environment, or green would be like a jungle or forest environment bag. And then there was a blue one for, ops around water, ocean ops, and tan for, like going in the desert. And so I stayed on call a lot, and I was able to make a lot more money besides the $20,000 a month on certain ops. It depended on what we got into.
You had mentioned earlier that there were some jobs that were offered to you and you didn't take them. So how is that dealt with within the inner circle? Is there an allocation of, okay, you can reject so many jobs, and after that, we start to question your loyalty?
No, but that is a really good question, because when someone does offer you a job and you turn it down, now see, Mike, here's where the civilian mindset breaks down. That's why need to know comes in. Because if they offer you a job and they tell you just the bare minimum for that job and you do turn it down, then you're not an operational risk later if they give that job to somebody else and there's an investigation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the less you know when a job is offered to you, it's just basically the job offer. And then if you accept it, then and only then, after acceptance, is the necessary information or the operational parameters handed to you to complete that mission. And so that's where you need to know. And the Black Ops world's totally different from the way everyone thinks, in the normal society. And once you get into it and you get that mindset and you get synced with it, you understand why they do those things. It's to protect everybody.
Now, how about the Oklahoma City bombing? Now, you were approached was it to run the operation, and it was $1 million that was offered to you? Can you fill us in on how that went down, how you were contacted, what they explained to you the job was, and then maybe explain, if you had accepted that job, would you be coordinating logistics? Would you be bringing in the other people that needed to be players in the event? So if you could take us through that would be great.
Yeah, sure. We had ways to communicate that were, off the records. And, we tried to stop all kinds of signal intelligence or ELIN, electronic intelligence. So I was contacted in a clandestine manner by one of the operatives. His name was Harold Leonard. He's deceased now, so I can use his name. And we'd worked on some ops before. And we went in a rural area out in the country up under the tree canopies. These guys are worried about satellites and photographic stuff and everything. Everyone gets pretty paranoid and secretive if they can stay alive long enough in the Black Ops world. The training people get in the military, we used to tell them, it's not the military, this is a different world, and you have to get up to speed with it. But anyway, we went and met out in a forest, and he had a purple and black backpack with about $500,000. He said it was $500,000 in cash. I didn't count it. I could see the money, but he said, we got a job for you. And I said, okay, where are we going? Which country? I figured it was Saudi Arabia or somewhere. I didn't know. And he said, no, it's here in the States. And I said, oh, in the States, okay, what kind of job is it? And he says, it's an EOD job, explosives and demolitions. And I said, what's the target? And he said, it's a building. I said, what kind of building? And he said, it's a federal building. I said, what? He said, yeah, it's a federal building. I said, which one? He said, it's the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. This was in early October of 1994, 6 months before anyone had ever heard about McVeigh or anything. And I was at the end of my rope by this time, and I knew it was a patchy job. I mean, $1 million is not nearly enough for a job like that. And on top of that, what I told him, I said, you guys went too far this time. I said, I can understand going overseas and doing this stuff. I said, but these are our own people. This is our own country. And there's no way I'm going to do this. I mean, I had a big patriotic thing come up. I was ready to kill him right there. And
did anybody else pick up on that? Like, this guy sounds... Like, when you say I was ready to kill him right there, there was no pause, like, in his voice. Like, either this guy's just a phenomenal actor, or this guy's for real. Like, that was chilling. Let me replay that part. The way he said I was ready to kill him right there, I mean, that was crazy.
Is not nearly enough for a job like that. And on top of that, what I told him, I said, you know, you guys went too far this time. I said, I can understand going overseas and doing this stuff. I said, but these are our own people. This is our own country. And there's no way I'm going to do this. I mean, I had a big patriotic thing come up. I was ready to kill him right there.
I mean, wow. Wow. I mean, wow. And notice how he didn't make some big show of that. Like, he just says it so calmly. Like, it's creepy. It's creepy.
And anyway, so that was the point where I turned from being an asset to a liability for them. And then I was worn out anyway by that time. And I had nerve damage. I got 26% nerve damage down my right leg, nerve damage down my left hand, broken bones, all kinds of stuff. I had several severe head injuries and stuff like that. So I was on my way out, and I didn't want any more to do. I just told him, I said, I can't take it anymore. I'm having bad dreams. I'm not operationally effective anymore. And he said, oh, you know, you can have a full EOD team. We'll give you where you want. And I said, no. I'm not doing it. I'm done. I've got to quit. I got to get out of this. I can't sleep at night. And so that's when and 2 days later, my handler, Duke Flaglier, he got wind of it through the op community. And he told me, he said, you need to leave the country. And I said, why? He said, now you know about an op. He said, that thing's going to come off sometime. And now you know about it. Now you're an operational risk. And they may just kill you to shut you up because now you know about it all. And he offered me the keys to his house in Belize. And he said, you can stage out of Belize. We'll meet you down there, and then we're going to get you somewhere. And so that's how all that ended.
You know, this is actually kind of crazy, though, that he had real friends. Because this is a really interesting story, because most of the time it doesn't end like this. Most of the time the guy just gets whacked, right? But he was in a position... Because, like he said, it was like black on black. So you had a black op and another black op, and the first group doesn't know about the second group, and there's plausible deniability, so nobody knows who's running the op in DC, etc., or which agency. So it sounds like he had real friends that looked out for him. So, and that's the only reason he's alive. But, I mean, it sort of makes sense, because... if he's that close with the handler, and if I don't know the exact, I don't know if he goes into it, like, did he formally run missions with the handler? Because if you're saving each other's lives, unless you're a real scumbag, like, you are going to form a bond with people if, you know, you're counting on each other to survive. Now, there are obviously some evil scumbags that don't care. They'll just take the money and kill their friend, mafia style. But yeah, I mean, this is just such a fascinating story, isn't it? Because he shared the details about certain Black Op guys, they're not trusting the command. So if they're in, like, if he has, like, a little close-knit of people that he does trust, you know, and they don't trust the outside, you know, anybody outside that bubble, CIA or anybody, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, maybe this is all nonsense, but if it's true, it makes sense.
And I never did any more jobs for him after that. I was just had it.
What was the desired outcome, Cody? Did they have a discussion about what it is they were trying to do by blowing up the Mora?
Well, that's another good point here by Jeff U1P. He still sees himself like a black op because he did not say the patriotic first. He first said the money wasn't enough, like a true contract guy. He said the trauma bonding is stronger as blood. Yeah, here's the other thing, though. But that was his cathartic moment, right? Because he was out after that, so it's actually, if this is true, like, it's also accurate to how he would recall it, right? So if he's recalling it in his memory, as that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Like, it was so outlandish, and he's fighting, like, he's got the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, And his brain is trying to rectify the monumental decision in front of this guy. And it's also curious how he brought up, like, it was a black and purple backpack. Does that have some kind of significance within Black Ops? I don't know. Obviously the purple is like a Illuminati, Freemason, royalty, conspiracy, New World Order color. But yeah, it's almost like he accurately, if it's an accurate memory, like he was fighting it, like, whereas, what if they had offered 20 million? Would he have said yes? But you're right. It's like his psyche, like the mental place that he was at the time. It's like, this is so insane. You offer this low amount of money, but it's so insane. It's like his brain is trying to rectify it in real time, and that's how he remembered it.
Building?
No. I was just offered the job, okay, and he said there was $500,000 here. Now you get the other half when it's done. And like I said before, he didn't give me any of the operational parameters because I hadn't accepted the job yet.
Yeah.
It's only after you accept the job that they tell you the necessary things that you need to know to get it done, because you want to know the minimum amount you can to accomplish the mission. That way, if you're caught and interrogated, you can't give anything up. So he didn't tell me why or anything. I learned all that later. And after that thing blew up, of course, I went black. I went totally black. Disguises, fake IDs, all that stuff. And I went down to Oklahoma, where between Tulsa and Oklahoma City, we had some old safe houses that were used moving the arms over in the CIA Op Centaur Rose in the 80s, as 82, 83, 84, 85, over there in Arkansas. And that's when I was a geophysicist in Tulsa, so it was right across the border. And I can tell you the story how we moved all those arms or whatever over there. But after the Murrah Building bombing in 95, April 19th, 95, I went black. I was very aware that I had turned that job down and that people knew about it, and I was an operational risk. So I went black and left the country for a little while and then came back later.
Now, if you had accepted that job, how much time would be necessary to plan a job like that? Is it?
They kind of skipped over a little bit. I want to know, like, the exact timeline. So his operator got him to Belize right after. And so this was anywhere between months to a year before it happened, something like that. So he goes to Belize, then X amount of time happens, but he's back in Oklahoma using fake IDs and all of that. I mean, that's kind of weird. He also doesn't, so he's doing nothing, so he's just living off of his savings, but I would think he wouldn't want to be anywhere near Oklahoma, although on the other hand, what's interesting, I was looking at a lot of cases, not recently, but a while ago, like with an espionage. When someone is wanted, a lot of times they stay local, which is crazy, but it's weird because it's almost like a double bluff, because why would somebody be in the area that they're wanted? And so you would think that, they flew the coop. You would think they left the state, left the country. But they actually stayed in a very small area from, the area in question. Would that be the safest area, the Oklahoma area, for him to be? I mean, I don't know. It's just, but he said he left the country, then he came back. And why did he come back? If he's still in touch with family. I mean, I want more answers there. Like, I'm really curious on this timeline here. Like, I don't know why the interviewer, skipped all that.
Weeks, months?
Yeah, Yeah, Mike, these are great questions. I love this, because I don't get to talk like this, much. But yeah, if I'd accepted that job, let's say that I said, okay, I'll take the job. And then I would have told him, $500,000 and $1.5 million when I'm done is bullshit. You're going to have to give me 20 to 50 million for a job like this because it's domestic. And if you can't pay me up front, I'm not doing it. That's what I would have told him. But let's say I did take that job. Okay.
You're so right, by the way, on that he was still thinking like a contractor, because he just said, I guess, what he was also considering saying. He needs all the money up front. And this guy sounds smart too, right? Like, if this is all legit, you can kind of tell how he survived this long. Because this does not seem like a gullible guy. Like, it seems like he's thought out all the angles, right? And so, yeah, it is very curious. Scott says, you need to figure out a way to interview this guy. That would be interesting, but I think that might be kind of dangerous. I'm pretty sure everybody's on a pretty big list that interviewed this guy. He's done a couple interviews. I don't know if he's done that many. He's done a couple interviews. And he has a book out, I think.
The way I would have done it is how they did it. You got to remember that this is going to be a big job, okay? And the Murrah building, when it went up, it killed like 168 people. It shattered glass in 258 buildings. It was $652 million in damage. It destroyed 86 cars, so forth. So
this guy. Either he's very smart, he has an eidetic memory, and this is all like. This guy must be off the charts smart and extremely detail-oriented, because throughout this whole interview, he always gives super exact specifics down to the digit. Like, he doesn't round. He always gives exact, precise numbers. That's curious.
Going to be a high level, very visible job. And you know there's going to be a lot of civilian blowback. There's no way you can cover something like that up. So what you have to do for the cover is you have to have a cover. And you would have to wire the building separately and then have somebody like Tim McVeigh or some other patsy drive that story with ammonium nitrate is so funny in diesel. The shockwave characteristics of those types of explosives in no way could destroy a building like that or even cause the minimal damage that we saw on those films you're going to show everybody later. But what I would have done was pre-wire that building with something like C4, which was plentiful in the ops community because it has a detonation rate of about 26,000 feet per second, and it has that sharp-cutting, hot explosive, which is necessary to cut the big steel beams in that building. And then I would have supplemented that with maybe mercury or some type of nano aluminum if that was available, something like that, and to cut the beams and everything. And then what you do is have the cover, like McVeigh, pull up in a truck, and you would have a more or less simultaneous detonation, so that for the civilian cover on the outside, you would say, okay, the lone bomber in the truck, okay, that's what took out the building. But the bombing from the truck would be at the same time as the detonation in the building. That way, all of it would be covered up in one big explosion, and they could use their propaganda machine in the media to say, oh, it was the lone bomber. But what really happened, is that two of the bombs didn't explode, and that caused a whole bunch of spin-off blowback, see? Anyway, so that's what I would have done on that building, was pre-wired ahead of time.
Shades of Columbine, with the multiple bombs, the patsies, and bombs not exploding. And that's another thing. Coincidence theorists really have a hard time with this. Like Murphy's Law, not everything always goes according to plan. And who knows, maybe depending if there's any... I wonder... See, we never discussed this. Here's another McGuire theory. Was it not an accident that some of the bombs didn't go off? Were there true patriots in the midst of the ranks of the people doing this, and even at Columbine? Were certain bombs intentionally sabotaged so they wouldn't go off because they didn't want to cause damage? Like there was a true patriot among that group and not just evil mercenaries? We never discussed that. And
you would have went in with some kind of civilian cover, like being a phone, you get some Southwestern Bell phone trucks, and, you'd get a bunch of uniforms and stuff, and you'd have some fake work orders printed up, and you'd show up with all your tools and phones, and you'd have a couple of guys actually working on the phone lines themselves, and everything would be covered. You'd have another team that would watch around you to make sure there were no cameras or civilian eyewitnesses, and then you'd plant the explosives and hide them and make sure the detonators were all right, and then get that all set up, and then you time that for when the patsy arrived.
How much time would be required, Cody, to put the whole thing in play from beginning to end? Is it 6 months, 9 months, a couple of weeks?
No, well, it depends. If you had the materials readily available, all the C4, and they generally use M7 DuPont blasting caps. The problem with those military caps is it takes 3.2 volts to set those off, but you have to keep them shunted. In other words, you have to keep the leads connected, because if you're in a big city, look where the Murrah building was, okay? It was downtown. The OG&E building, Oklahoma Gas and Electric building, was right across, close to it. They had other buildings, across the street. There's cell phone towers. There's people driving up and down the road with cell phones. And what happens is you have secondary RF bleed off. It's radio frequency bleed off from civilian electronic devices, okay, in the area. You're running an op in an area. It's in a big city, and there's a lot of electronic signals being bounced around. The caps, the electric blasting caps, if that's what you're going to use, and that's what I would have used, you have to keep them shunted till the last minute. You could put the explosives in place a week or two ahead of time. The longer they're in place, of course, the higher the risk that they're detected or found. So the ideal thing would be to put them in a few days before the op and then keep the caps shunted until right before that. Because, see, Mike, if you unshunt those caps and you hook them up to the power source to detonate, a secondary signal can cause induced electric currents in the leads to the caps.
I mean, this guy is just so incredibly knowledgeable. Like, what are the chances this guy is not legit? This guy knows every detail of everything. Huh.
And you can have a detonation.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So what I would have done if that was my op, and if it was my op, all those bombs would have went off. They wouldn't have had any blowback, because we're professionals at what we do. And I don't know what happened there, and I don't know who they hired, but those guys are still out there somewhere. The people that actually did that and wired it, they may be listening right now. Very few of them are going to step forward like me and talk about this, but that's how I would have done it. I would have had Apache pull up in a truck like that, or had some kind of secondary, civilian cover that would be believable to the civilian population in the area. And then I would have had the main charges all set to make sure that the building was collapsed, the records destroyed, and the whole thing laid off on Apache. That would be the perfect black op for that. Because afterwards, Mike, there's going to be news crews and films and everything else, and you've got to have something that's believable for the investigators that follow.
Can I ask you, Cody? I interviewed Chip Tatum, the CIA whistleblower, on several occasions, who was a former assassin for George Bush Sr. And he said, when it comes to top assassins, the group of the people qualified for these type of top jobs are actually quite few. And so around the world, when you see it, it's very often the same people that are being used all over again and again and again. When it comes to these type of blowing up buildings or these type of operations, is that the skill set needed? Is that sort of common knowledge among operators, or are we back to just a select few that can do these type of things?
No, on an op like this, we studied assassination, sabotage, and espionage, for a long time. And I trained with some Israeli Mossad agents over in Tokyo and so forth. But in any intelligence group, top assassins, just like Chip said, and God bless his soul, for standing up and speaking out too, and thank him for that. We need to shed as much light on this stuff as possible, I believe. But assassinations are one thing. Bombing a building is a form of assassination. But that building was not really bombed to assassinate anyone. I mean, you can assassinate someone with explosives on a car, with a solenoid or so forth. But
the level of detail he speaks about, literally everything. I mean, this is wild. This is wild. If he's not legit, it would be very surprising.
The EOD requirements, explosives and demolitions, that's generally stuff from military guys. And so they would have hired an ex-military cutout, someone that had
Austin MP in the house here saying UFC was in OKC this weekend right when you started covering this synchronicity. Yeah, that is kind of funny, isn't it? I had no idea. I saw the ad for it. Yeah, afterwards. It's like, it's kind of weird because it's not like they're in Oklahoma City very often, right? Like UFC has rarely done events in Oklahoma City. How many have they done? Like 2?
Demolitions training in one of the branches of the service, like Timothy McVeigh. He was an ex Desert Storm tank commander in Desert Storm 1, January of 91. He did get a Bronze Star for confirmed kills. And so the perfect military cutout, here's the patsy. But EOD jobs are a lot different than assassination jobs. You can use explosives to assassinate people, but it's really messy, and there's a lot of blowback associated with it. If you set a car bomb off in Bogota to kill a cabinet minister or something, they know that's an assassination. But if the guy has a heart attack one night in his bed, then plausible deniability is maintained. And that person, they can say, well, they killed him because he was the prime minister. You go, wait a minute, how do you know that? He just had a heart attack. And so it depends on the op. Some of the ops they hand you will be, we want this guy killed real public and messy because they want to send a message. Other times they want it quiet where no one knows it was actually an assassination because that's the perfect black op. The guy dies, it's natural causes, and everybody walks away.
How common are these type of assassinations? The silent ones?
Well, it's hard to know because if you don't see the forensic reports, it's hard to know. I mean, because people do die of heart attacks and people do die of strokes. And, I mean, you can hit someone with a modulated microwave device, and you can fry the capillaries in their brain and simulate a stroke. And when the standard civilian doctors in the area do their forensic pathology exams, it looks to them like they just had a stroke and some of their blood vessels broke because there's no
capillaries simulating. I mean, the specificity of everything he's saying is so wild. I mean, this might be the craziest whistleblower interview I've ever heard.
Evidence of a microwave. And so it's hard to say if it's a real stroke or a microwave, and that's the perfect plausible deniability. There for a while they were using these protein synthesized poisons, and, you coat the inside of a drinking glass and it dries perfectly clear and everything, and then when the fluid hits it and they drink it, the death comes in the first minute of the natural causes. And no one can tell. They can do a standard analysis on an autopsy, and they use things like a GC mass spec. That's a gas chromatography mass spectrometer, and they take tissue samples from the subject, and then they gasify them and run a spectral analysis, and they also do a centrifuge on them to do a mass separation so that they can tell the exact nature of the poison. But if you use strychnine or something, then they can do a sample and know the guy was poisoned. But if they use these new protein synthesized poisons, that means the natural metabolic process of the human body metabolizes out the poison as it's killing you. So you die, and the poison is dissipated in the death process. Okay? And so these poisons are very hard to detect, and it's hard to tell if it's an assassination or just a legitimate stroke. And so the answer to your question is like, how long's the string? I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast. I apologize.
No. You're doing great. It's very intriguing. You had mentioned the Mossad. Are you aware of how often Mossad has been involved in these black ops operations? Is this something that you're aware of or no?
No, I'm not aware of. I have heard from other people in the black ops community that they liaison, of course, with the Israelis on several things. There are times, like in Amman, Jordan, or something like that, where people, someone, the KGB or CIA may be running an op or something, and then there's a mutual advantage to be gained from joining up with another intel agency like the Mossad. And so they'll share their intelligence or their agents operationally. But that is a very strange thing, because even the guys in the CIA, for instance, don't trust each other much. And then the guys in the Mossad don't trust each other much. And then when you put them both together and they're supposed to liaison on an op, say, to take down an Al-Qaeda guy or something, you have all the distrust between the agencies, complementing the distrust internally. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so everyone gets real funny about stuff like that, and sharing the intelligence is another thing you need to know. The Mossad doesn't want to share anything unless it's absolutely operational necessary with CIA and vice versa. So, that's a big can of worms, stuff like that, but it does happen.
Now, you had mentioned Timothy McVeigh, and obviously he's the patsy for the whole Oklahoma City bombing. And I was mentioning to Ole before we got started, Cody, that the thing that always got me with McVeigh was he never seemed very concerned about the fact that he got caught, that he was on death row, and then ultimately he was given the death sentence. He was injected. So what is your view of who McVeigh was? Was he a mind control subject? I guess that's one of my questions. Maybe we can get into that a little bit, but he always seemed like a strange duck to me.
Oh, you are absolutely right. This is a great... See, I haven't talked about this in a lot of the interviews. I know a lot of stuff, so let's just get into it. I was 3 cells down from McVeigh. They planted me with evidence. We'll tell that story later. And I was 3 cells down from him in Supermax.
What? I didn't even know this part. This guy's 3 cells down from McVeigh at Super... Okay, this is about to get real interesting. So this is where one would really perhaps think this stretches credulity. Les Xylophone says Strassmeyer was trained with the IDF. Yeah, he was. Went over him briefly. We need to do a bigger deep dive there. There's also yet another individual we haven't gone over yet, but this is a multi-part episode. Obviously, there's so much to cover here.
I never got to see him. I talked to one guy who did get to talk to him, and I was there that day when he was executed. They sent him to the Terre Haute FCI, Federal Correctional Institute. That was June 11th, 2001. But the skinny on McVeigh was he had been in Desert Storm, and he had got his shots like all the troops did going over there. And he was part of a covert experiment with Lockheed Martin that he didn't know about. He was given his standard series of injections, and they implanted a microchip in him. And back then they were testing the protein codes for autoimmune response and so forth. And it was part of a Lockheed Martin covert test of their Beast satellite system. It was a battle engagement area tracker system. And anyway, it was a real-time test where satellites could look down on a battlefield, an active battlefield with smoke and fire, oil fires and dust and everything, and track people. In some of the dog tags, they had experimented with putting microchips in them. That way, if a soldier was blown apart, they could use RFID instruments to find the bodies. And so this was part of a test, like if you put the chip in the buttocks, usually during an explosion, there'll be arms and legs blown off, but the torso will remain. And if you know what kind of ordnance is used, you could figure the blast radius and then go back and find the body parts and get them all together, to be sent back to the families. But he was injected with that and didn't know it. And then later on, when he got back, he started developing sores on his butt and everything. And he had it removed. And we know this because he wrote letters to his sister Jennifer. I have copies of those letters. And when he was indicted, the FBI went and took a lot of that stuff from her house. And she was later called to testify up here in the 10th Circuit Federal Court under Judge Richard Mage. And so anyway, to make a long story short, he got back from Desert Storm and was kind of pissed about the microchip thing, but he signed up with Special Forces at Benning, and they had about Fort Benning. They had over 100 guys in the class, and he was approached clandestinely. His CO and some CIA guys got him and like 10 other guys out of the class and had a covert meeting and said, we want you to work for us. Your front is going to be Special Forces. You go ahead and finish your school and you get your Green Beret and everything, and we want you to conduct assassinations, bombings, and move drugs and so forth. And McVeigh turned him down, and he didn't want to do it. And we know this because he wrote his sister, Jennifer, and he laid out all the things the CIA wanted to do. I have a copy of that in this book. And so he quit that, and then he went up to Buffalo, New York to...
I mean, I have copies of all the letters as well. Apparently, there's also a letter, I think, to the grandfather. And we'll be going over that as well, but one step at a time here. Just so much to go over. Yeah, Jeff U1P says that's why there's no autopsy. Yeah, there was no autopsy. I mean, there's so much to go over. Some people believe he's not dead, obviously, because there's no actual verifiable proof that he's dead. So, yeah.
Calspan, which is a huge contractor. I mean, they were in the Air Force's Redstone program, which was a counterintelligence, counter-SIGINT, ECM, electronic countermeasures type of thing. They did microchip work, highly classified electronic stuff, and he was a security guard there. And I think it's there that he was approached. It's a standard program of alienation and isolation when you take an ex-military guy that was in combat. Now he's sitting in some soft civilian job, and psychologically he's bored shitless. Excuse my language, but he's bored, and then he's ready to do something. And he also had the motivation, to bomb the Murrah building because he had been microchipped without his knowledge. He'd been offered jobs to do a bunch of dirty stuff, and he didn't want to do it. And then on top of that, he'd also seen what they did down at Waco. He was actually there. And I can tell you that story, too, if you want to.
He was at Waco, too?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what? Wait, did we go over that? He was pissed about Waco and Ruby Ridge. No, he went to Waco after the fact. I vaguely remember something about this. I mean, yeah, this is weird. Walt Chamberlain in the chat says it's crazy how much of this event was covered up. Yeah. Yeah. The Ant One, welcome. Wait, what? LS Zalaphone in the chat says Ellis Armistead was hired to pick up the ashes of McVeigh 2 years late after he was hired by the Harrises to pick up Eric's ashes. What? Coincidence City? What? Oh, what?
Okay, I didn't know that.
No, you want me to tell you what happened at Waco?
Yeah. I mean, if it doesn't interrupt your flow of the story.
No, we can branch off in anything. Make a long story short, I knew a guy named Ron Cole who was a Branch Davidian. I'm not a Branch Davidian, but he was one of Koresh's best friends. Just before the compound was hit, that was February 28th of 1993, where 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians were dead. Just before that date, Ron's sick mother was in Florida, so he flew down there. He was taking care of her, and then the next day he saw it on the news that shootout had erupted, and he called Koresh immediately from the phone. That's before the feds cut the phone line. And this is what Ron Cole told me straight to my face. I was not at the compound at that time, but this is what he told me. He said he called David Koresh, and he asked him what happened, and Koresh had just been shot. And the phone line would later be cut. But Koresh told him, he said, well, how did it start? And he said that there was a ATF pulled up with cattle trucks, and the Branch Davidian dogs started running out towards them barking, and the ATF just started shooting them through the windows in the cattle truck. There was never an announcement, never a warrant, never anything. And so when they saw these guys in cattle trucks shooting at the dogs, then they started shooting at the Branch Davidian compound. So the Branch Davidians returned fire, and that's when Koresh got shot. So Ron Cole flew back up immediately, but by that time the phone lines were cut, and the Fed had set a perimeter around the compound. And so Ron Cole got with the rest of the Branch Davidians that were not in the compound when the shootout started. They were up in Waco shopping and, doing stuff in town, and they all banded together and set up a camp at the perimeter, and they stayed there for days watching. And at night, they would see these black helicopters with no markings and no lights. They would circle the compound, and they saw streaks of light coming down, green, orange, red. And so they didn't know what it was. They were all civilians. And so they were looking at it with binoculars and stuff, and then they said, man, we wish we had some night vision. There was a guy there, and he said, I've got some military night vision. And they looked at it, they could see the chopper, see everything, and they said, what is that? And he says, well, I just got back from Desert Storm. They did night ops on those choppers over there. Those are M60 machine guns, and those are tracer rounds you're seeing. And they said, who are you? And he said, I'm Timothy McVeigh. And so McVeigh stayed with Ron Cole and those guys for a while, and they watched the carnage. What was happening, Mike, is they were flying around at night, circling, machine gunning that compound up, because it's a standard Delta Force tactic when you have insurgents in a building and you have a perimeter on the outside of the building. What you want to do is collapse the perimeter and get as close to the building as you can. Now, how do you do that? If the snipers are up on top of the building and the shooters, what you do is you take away the high ground and you press them and push them down to the lower floors. Therefore, they can't shoot as far, and you can collapse the perimeter inward. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they saw, and that's what they watched. And then this story about Ron Cole goes on and on. But anyway, McVeigh had seen what they were doing, and he said, they're killing our own people. And they watched them do it. I mean, there was no trial, no nothing. They just machine gunned them to hell. And then later on April 19th of 1993, that's when Waco ended. There were 54 dead and 21 children that were dead, and they lied to Governor Ann Richardson and told her there was meth labs and all that to violate the Posse Comitatus rules, and they got tanks off Fort Hood. That's where my dad took his basic training for the 25th Infantry Division, but they got the tanks off Fort Hood, and then they went and started that fire on a very windy day, and it burned the whole compound down, which covered up the murders that they'd committed with the helicopters. So McVeigh saw all that, and he was pretty soured up about that, plus getting planted with a microchip that made him halfway sick, and then also being offered, all these covert jobs with the CIA to move drugs and assassinate people, and then use the good name of the Special Forces as their cover. So a lot of people don't know this, but we have all this detailed in the book with not his actual letters, but copies of them.
So McVeigh then, he had motivation to bomb the Mora building based upon the chip and based upon what he saw at Waco.
Well, he had a motive. He was pissed off about what had been done to him, I'm sure, but he might have been offered $1 million like me, or $10 million or something. I don't know that, and I never got a chance to talk to McVeigh because where we were up there was the tightest security possible. I mean, it was supermax solitary confinement, and McVeigh, I talked to a guy named Gerald Two Bulls. He's a full-blood Lakota Indian off the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and Gerald was a whole orderly. He was the guy that they'd let him out of his cell, and his job was to mop and clean and so forth. And he told me this straight to my face one day. He says, McVeigh's right here beside you. And I said, really? I didn't know. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, man, the security's so tight. He said, they won't even let the guards talk to him. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, Lieutenant Russell and a couple of the other ones that are lieutenant grade, they're the only ones that have clearance to even talk to him. And he said, I walked down and I was mopping the floor, and he was standing there with his face out the window, and at the window, and all Gerald said was, hey, and McVeigh said, hey, and then the guards threw Gerald in his cell for 3 days just for saying, hey. That's how tight the security was. And then right after McVeigh was executed there on June 11, 2001, I was at the FDC, that's the Federal Detention Center, Englewood, Colorado, for a legal visit with my attorney, Harvey Steinberg. He's a Denver Broncos attorney. But one of my cellmates, Chris Holsinger, he had an attorney named Nathan Chambers. And Nathan Chambers was Timothy McVeigh's attorney when he was executed. And Chambers sat and held Timothy McVeigh's mother's hand at the death chamber there, the lethal injection chamber at Terre Haute, and watched. He was on the front row and watched McVeigh get the juice. And so he came back to the FDC 2 weeks after that, and I talked to him, and I asked Nathan, I said, what was it like? You held McVeigh's mother's hand? And he goes, yeah. And I said, what was it like? And he just put his hand up with his palm facing out and closed his eyes and shook his head, and he walked out. And so it was obviously a pretty traumatic event. A lot of people, Mike, you hear all these conspiracy guys think, oh, they didn't execute McVeigh, that was fake and everything. Well, the only thing I know about that is I talked to Nathan Chambers personally about 3 feet away from me, and I watched the man's emotional reaction, and he certainly believed that he was killed, and he certainly was shook up about it, and he sat on the front row. And so all I can tell is actionable stuff that I know, that I saw myself, all that conspiracy stuff, I just don't know about it.
Yeah, it's interesting with McVeigh, though, because like I said, Cody, he never actually seemed to be, he showed very little emotion whenever the newsreel, the footage was shown of him on the news, and even when he went in to get the lethal injection, that's what it was, right? Lethal injection? Is that how he died?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know whether that was the depiction that the media wanted to put out for us to see, that this guy was basically emotionless. I mean, what is your take on that? Was he emotionless, or was he angry? What was his disposition?
I've seen those same pictures and everything. I will tell you that there were several instances where they drugged prisoners. Okay, and they could have given him something in his food. I don't know. I know that myself, there was another guy named Kerry James Gagan who had been given a van load of C4 in Denver by CI asset 3 days before the Murr building went up. He went down to Trinidad, Colorado to meet his contacts, which turned out to be 3 Middle Eastern men who had blueprints to the Murr building in English. He saw them, and it spooked him. And he thought he was going to be Apache or something, and he drove straight back to the Secret Service office in Denver. He told them, I'm a CI asset. I took a van load of explosives to these guys. I think something big's going on. And CI got wind of that through the Secret Service. They planted his house with explosives, and the FBI hit him. Then they threw him in there. They had me, him, and McVeigh, anybody with operational knowledge, and Nichols, that had any operational knowledge about this thing, were all in there together. And so I was worried about them poisoning me. I was in Supermax solitary. All I had was a pair of skivvies. They took out the mattress. No blankets, no pillows. I slept on a concrete floor, and they would put food in, the bean hole, they called it, and I wouldn't eat it. I was getting weak because I figured they'd poison us. I heard from several other inmates, like Gerald Two Bulls, that he'd been in there 7 years, and they said, oh, yeah, they drug people. The CI comes in here, and they disappear in the middle of the night. Then the next day, the BOP computers at the Bureau of Prison, they're all wiped clean. And I hope there's no records, there's no nothing, the guys disappear. And he said what they usually do is they come in with tasers. They have these clear shields with a taser, and they'll tase you in the cell, and then they'll come in and give you a shot, and while you're laying on the floor, and then they drug you, and then you disappear. And so McVeigh that's very real. Don't believe for a minute all the propaganda here in America. Once you go in those Supermax prisons and stuff, all bets are off. And you can die in there real easy. And so McVeigh could have been drugged. He could have just been stoic. Some of the guys that worked with him at Calspan up there in Buffalo, New York, at that contractor before the Murr building went up, I have some things in my book with some of these guys, and they said that they worked with him at Calspan, okay, and that they saw that he would be like two different people. One of his former platoon commanders was a guy named Captain Terry Guild, and I said he went to Fort Benning. It was Fort Bragg he went to for Special Forces. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. But
he was down in Bragg in Carolina?
Yeah, there was another guy named Jeff Camp, and he worked with McVeigh as a security guard in upstate New York after high school. And, he said that McVeigh was a very strange person. It was like he had two different personalities. That's a quote. And so he could have been mind-controlled. Some people speculate about that. He could have been part of a different program that way. We don't know. I don't know those things. The only intelligence I have is those letters that he sent Jennifer and what other people that talked to him directly, like Nathan Chambers and Gerald Two Bulls told me. But I really can't answer that question. He could have just been, being in Supermax solitary like he was, that really wears you out in there. And they don't give you any fresh air or sunshine or, sometimes you go a week without a shower. And so I don't know what they were doing to him in there. He was close to me. I know what they were doing to me. It was horrible. But when he went to be executed, they could have gave him a little drug or something to calm him down, because some people fight when they get into that execution chamber and they actually start strapping on the straps and everything. I mean, you know, people can nut up on you.
Yeah. What was their issue with Koresh? We got the official story about Koresh and all that stuff, but what, from your perspective and the people that you know, what was the issue that they had with David Koresh?
Well, here's what Ron Cole told me. I never knew any of the Branch Davidians. I never had nothing to do with them, although in February 28th, when that shootout began, about a day or two later, I had the biggest machine gun shop here in Colorado, had Class 3 licenses for machine gun silencers, so forth. We were the biggest one in the state, and that was a civilian front for some other stuff we were doing. But anyway, my compliance officer out of the Denver ATF Field Division was a guy named Doug Miller, and he did all my compliance inspections. He showed up at my shop down there without any warning. It's the first time he ever did that. And he says, I want to do a complete inventory of all your Class 1 guns and all your machine guns and silencers. I said, okay. And because one of my main distributors was RSR down in Dallas, Texas. And so I said, why are you doing this? I mean, I've got a perfect record here. And he says, well, did you hear about that Branch Davidian shootout? And I said, I heard something on the news. I don't know what's going on. And he goes, well, we want to see if you've sent any weapons down there to the Branch Davidians. And I said, well, here's the books. Here's all the stuff. And he spent about 3 or 4 hours going through everything, making sure all the numbers match, everything. And he said, they're going to hit that compound, and we need to know what kind of ordnance they've got in there. And I said, I don't know. And he asked me, do you know anybody that knows anything? I said, no. And, but Ron Cole told me, after Koresh was dead and the place was burned down, he told me, I asked him that same question you asked. I said, what's the deal? You know, they said he was a child molester and they were running meth labs and all this crap. And he said, Cody, he says, Koresh was the nicest guy. The children followed him around. They liked him. He played with them. All that sexual stuff, that's crap. Bill Clinton was the one doing all the sex stuff, not Timothy McVeigh. And he was actually calling the shots through Janet Reno, the U.S. attorney at the time. But I had some friends in the Defense Intelligence Agency stuff we worked with that had coffee with Reno. They were head of no narcotics down there in Dade County, Florida, when Reno was the district attorney. And they told me how dirty she was. She lifted evidence out of the cocaine and stuff they brought in, you know, to give to her lesbian buddies, and any politically sensitive cases, you know, she'd make sure the evidence was lost and everything. And he said she was really dirty. But that was Captain Glenn Wilson. He was also in Vietnam, but he's dead now too, of Agent Orange. So back to Ron Cole. He said that Koresh, they had no drugs of any kind. They were against drugs. They were a religious group, a Christian group, and that the kids, everything was open. Koresh was rarely alone, you know, with kids and stuff like that. There's always other people around. And he said all that stuff about them being pedophiles and meth labs and all was just crap, you know, propaganda they were putting out in the mainstream media to demonize them, because the ATF went in there without a search warrant. The ATF was illegal. And one of my partners for a couple of years was a guy named ATF Agent Blake L. Butler. He was at the Branch Davidian compound. He was also at the shootout in Ruby Ridge, Idaho with Randy and Vicki Weaver, and he was supposed to be working at the Murrah building on April 19th, 1995, but didn't show up for work that day. He would later get the nation's top cop award from Vice President Gore and Janet Reno herself. But no, Ron Cole told me that all that was propaganda, because the ATF had went in there, and when they went to their trial, Mike, at the trial, the ATF could not produce a search warrant. It was never produced at a trial because the ATF did not have one. They went up to that compound and started a shootout.
For what purpose, though, Cody? Why did they initiate the shootout? What was it that?
I don't know that. My speculation is, and I asked Ron about that, and here's what Ron said. He said that they had been going to a lot of gun shows, and they had been selling a lot of guns legally and everything, and that they had gotten some guns that had machine gun conversion packs. You know, when they're separate, they're legal, but when you put them together, they're not. And I said, was there any illegal stuff going on in here? He goes, not that I know of. But there was a lot of Branch Davidians in there. And the ATF had obviously infiltrated that place on weapons stuff. And what I think happened was the ATF had spent a lot of money with undercover agents, and they found no violations. So they had to justify something to their superiors. So if there's not a crime, you manufacture one. But that's all speculation on my part. I do not know why that all really happened.
Okay. All right. No, fair enough. Fair enough. Ole, I know you have a question, and I've been commandeering the discussion here with Cody, so your turn.
No, I just wanted to go back to Chip Tatum as well, because he said that on several occasions he was flying prisoners people into Springfield, Missouri, the prison there, the installation there. And he said that they were there, they were sent there to what he referred to as the famous doctors. But what he was actually talking about was that these prisoners were going through all kinds of weird, bizarre experiments and so on. And also Cody's friend from Max Security there was sent to Springfield, Missouri. I just want to also point out that Timothy McVeigh was in there, but nobody knows how much he was transported in and out, or whatever they did with him, or if he was even there at times, you know. So there's so many things that are hidden that we.
I mean, this guy revealed so much about Black Op operations, prisons, all this stuff. It's crazy. I just want to know more about this guy. This guy's so fascinating.
It's very hard to know what actually happened.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Ola, I've got so much stuff. I have friends that, I'm not going to use their name. They're still alive, but they were Army Rangers, and they were approached just like McVeigh and the Special Forces to work for CIA, and they were down in Nicaragua. Make a long story short, this whole story's in the book, but you know what they do when the CIA pulls out a Army guy like that, they'll fake his DOD files, and they'll create what they call a jacket, and they plant it into the DOD computer. So when you're looking at his file later on, he's up for review or promotion, it'll say he was, at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and he got a medal, and he did all this. The whole time, he's pulling black ops for the CIA in Nicaragua. But since it's a black op, all that's sanitized out of the records. And so there's a cover or a legend, produced. But one of the guys was down there, and they were on a top secret op. And make a long story short, they went in a village, and all the people were dead, men, women, children. But the dogs and cats and chickens and monkeys and stuff are all alive. So they immediately put on their NBC suits, and there was this burn mark in the canopies up above them in the jungle. It was a zigzag gray mark, and they'd never seen anything like it. And they got out their NBC kits, and they couldn't, that's nuclear, biological, chemical. I forget. We're talking to a lot of civilians that may not know what I'm saying. So if I say a term and you don't understand, please stop me. But anyway, so they were in this, seeing this strange thing. I mean, the animals alive, people dead. And they pulled back. They had an encrypted sat link, and they called it in. And that night they waited, and they saw these strange beams coming down from the sky. No one had ever seen them before. A lot of guys have been in NOM. They'd seen NODOPS and various ordnance that was used, and no one's seen anything like it. The next day, the CIA station chief himself flew in a 204 Huey. He landed, he confiscated his own Black Ops team's cameras, equipment, films, and told them they were never there, they didn't see what they were seeing, and to get out of there. And so...
Is this taking an interdimensional alien entity turn? I did not see this coming. This is crazy. We went from Oklahoma City bombing to possibly interdimensional aliens coming from the sky.
Later on, I told me, what do you think that was? And he says, I think it was some kind of Star Wars defense initiative, the Reagan thing. See, this back in the 80s. And they were using those beams, particle beams or laser beams from the sky, from satellites or from other planes up there, and they were testing it. And they could tune the microwaves and tune the stuff to where it would destroy human DNA, but not the animals. And that was their only explanation for that. He said it was the strangest thing he ever saw. So to get back what Chip Tatum is saying there, Ole, they threw this guy in there with us. What happened was he had done everything. He got out of the Army Rangers, got his 20, and he was living in Colorado Springs. And one of his old op buddies had left the country and come back, and he called him. He said, "Hey, bro, how's it going?" And he said, "I'm thinking about writing a book." And he says, "Oh, no, don't ever write any about all that stuff down there. That's highly top secret." He said, "No, it'll be all right." And the next day, 2 FBI agents show up at the guy's house, and they had his phone tapped. And they arrested him and planted him again, like that's their standard deal, and threw him in there with us. Well, this guy was in there for a while, and me and him talked some stuff. I knew some of the codes that were used in Nicaragua, so he opened up to me. And they came and took him, and Judge Nottingham was the court ordered him to go to the mental institution there at Springfield, Missouri, and Judge Nottingham was appointed by ex-Director Central Intelligence George Bush, see. All cases to do with national security, CIA, NSA was all steered to him, like Joe Naccio, the Q West case, see. And so he court-ordered him for a mental evaluation to go to Springfield, and we didn't see him for 6 months. And he came back slobbered. I was standing there. They had an electronic door. They opened it, and the guard said, "Snodgrass, get over here and help this inmate." And I held him. He slobbered a wet spot all over my. He was an Army Ranger. You know, he slobbers this wet spot all over me. And later on, he started coming to the next few days. All the drugs wore off. And then they dropped the charges on him. So they held him 6 months, ordered him to go to the nut hut. He told me they put him in a straitjacket and gave him all kinds of stuff. He didn't remember much. He pissed and shit his pants a lot, and he didn't remember much for 6 months. And then they came back, dropped all the charges. And see, that's a standard ploy how they use the Department of Justice to cover up CIA ops. You know, if anyone's going to talk or write a book or whatever, then you can just arrest them on some bogus charge, send them to a CIA steer judge who sends them to the nut hut there. And so Chip's absolutely right. They brought prisoners in and out there all the time. Another hub they sent him through was the Oklahoma City transfer station down in Oklahoma City. And there were several guys there that hung themselves just before they were going to testify to McVeigh's grand jury. And all those stories and dates and names and times are in the book, too.
What? How many of those people were there? Well, yeah, I'm going to have to go over this book. Because that's a lot of information there. That's quite a lot.
This is a massive cover-up. It's just huge. It's huge.
Now, the book, Cody, you're referring to, what book is that?
Yeah, that's this book I wrote. It's called Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. And I'll give out my email if anyone wants a copy. My email is Cody Golden Elk at yahoo.com. That's my Indian name. I'm part Cherokee Indian, so that's Cody Golden Elk at yahoo.com. And so they can get a CD of it now, and we're working on a website and all this stuff right now. But the point is there's massive cover-ups in the DOJ. The CIA basically controls that whole 10th circuit. They control other circuits. They have things called the control files where they get dirt on judges. Judge Nottingham, in the 10th Circuit, he had to resign under a sex scandal with prostitutes later. I mean, the whole thing is just corrupt to the bone. But we haven't covered all that yet. But any other questions? I hope I'm not talking too fast.
No, it's fascinating. What strikes me is that the level of corruption, the level of how much control the deep state has is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And, and the average person hasn't a clue how this stuff works. And I'm sitting here as somebody who does conspiracy research, and I'm thinking to myself how much I don't know either. And I'm somebody that has invested a lot of time into this. So this has been really an extraordinary conversation. I did want to ask you, though, you mentioned about the energy weapons, the microwave weapons. How long ago was that?
That was in the 80s, during the regional conflict, with the Sandinistas, the civil war between the Contras and the Sandinistas. Daniel Ortega was the communist guy. Now, Russians were pouring all kinds of ordnance in there. And Yeah, and here's what this guy told me while they were down there. He said that that's the only thing, he sat and watched it. And a lot of the guys that he was working with had been in theater in conflict and seen night ordnance being deployed, and no one had ever seen anything like it. He said there were definitely beams, like light beams. And he had heard that they could fine-tune or modulate the frequencies to disrupt DNA in humans, but leave like dogs or something alone. Now, these type of directed energy weapons, there's been a massive black ops thing about them where they use, for instance, modulated microwaves. There was a test, it was a CI operation called Holy See, HOLYSEE, and they were field testing a unit that was made in E-Systems in El Paso, Texas. And what it was composed of is a sending dish and a digital microprocessor which sent modulated microwaves around the 840 megahertz frequency range. It would hit the human cranium. That's the natural resonance frequency of the human cranium. So they would set up a resonance pattern of microwaves inside a human cranium, modulate those with a digital microprocessor, and thereby induce auditory signals in the brain where you'd hear voices. It was a synthetic telepathy device. It was a device designed to send thoughts and put them in someone else's mind. So they field tested this equipment in the Vatican. They had some CIA agents dress up like priests and infiltrate.
What? Has anybody heard of this? In the Vatican? They're doing these tests in the Vatican. This is pretty crazy. This is pretty mind-shocking. Wow. Huh. This interview was 2017, I believe.
And so what they would do, they'd have another guy operating the unit, would send the thoughts to guys, and then these priests would supposedly have visions and hear voices in their heads at night. And they'd wake up, and they'd go, wow, I had a dream, and, Jesus talked to me, or somebody gave me a vision. And then the other agents would go, oh, what was it? And they'd record it. Then they could compare what was sent with what was actually being transmitted in the field, and then tweak the operational parameters of the program to increase its effectiveness. And that was one very small thing. They've used X-rays, ELF waves. They had another device that used EM or electromagnetic field waves to induce signals in the auditory nerve that comes out of your eardrum, and it hooks onto your eardrum and then goes into your medulla oblongata in the back part of your head where sounds are processed, and it induced.
Uh-oh, he brought out the medulla oblongata, Waterboy style. Did not see that coming either. Did not see that coming.
Currents in that nerve to simulate sounds. And so they experimented with a wide variety of mind control techniques, directed energy weapons, all kinds of things. Because in the 80s, our embassy over in Moscow had been beamed by the KGB. It was a covert program the Russians cooked up to cause sickness and make people's heads cloudy and where they couldn't do their jobs and all. Well, the CIA had double agents in the KGB's program. So what the CIA did was piggyback that program, and they didn't tell our embassy staff anything about it. And what they did was let the Russians run their program, bomb our people, and then they were gleaning the intelligence through their doubles. And so the ambassador himself got leukemia, and a bunch of them got sick when they got back to the States. But these programs have been ongoing all the way through the 80s and into the 90s, and Project Slammer, that was another one, and it goes on. But they've experimented with the large, lasers, how to make the power supplies, how to use phase conjugation technology with X-rays to read those platinum mylar strips in money and all kinds of stuff like that. I actually had someone who wanted me to get a synthetic telepathy device for him. So I talked to my higher ups, and these guys didn't have enough money because that stuff's, you get a lot of trouble doing that kind of thing.
Synthetic telepathy. Who saw this coming in an Oklahoma City bombing episode? I mean, what? What? Scott says this guy went from Oklahoma bombing to Waco to experimental technology with no hesitation. Yep, same tone. Same tone.
No, I just want to comment once again with Chip Tatum, fill in what he was talking about with these directed energy weapons and so on. And he said that what's going on nowadays, he has no idea about. He left his service, or whatever you want to call it, in 1992, I believe. But at that point, before that, he said that they were testing out different directed energy weapons. There was one time they were trying to hit, it was a satellite that had broken down that was just floating around up there, and they were just using it to target practice. And they missed it, and it diverted the energy beam, or whatever you want to call it, in the wrong direction. And it ended up with levering, I think it was 800 square kilometers or square miles of forest, I believe in Wyoming or Colorado, where all the trees were lying in the exact same direction, but nothing was killed. All the animal life was fine, but all the trees were hit down. And he said that it was blamed on a massive big storm, but like he was laughing, saying what kind of storm will just put thousands of trees lying in the exact same direction.
Right, and when you modulate microwaves, they also have assassination weapons that are directed energy weapons, and they target the nerve that goes through the pericardium in your heart. It's the nerve that triggers and fires your heart. Your heart is electrical, and that's where they put pacemakers in people, when that nerve dysfunctions. But they know the frequencies to alter that and actually make your heart, go into spasm and so forth. And they've done a number of assassinations, as I understand, from some of my higher-ups with things like that. I never saw one of those devices, but I have been hit on 4 different occasions with microwave devices that were operating in the areas that we were. And I have the old mercury fillings in my mouth from the 60s. And every time the microwaves hit me, my teeth start hurting, because there's something called the coefficient of absorption, and heavy metals like mercury fillings absorb microwaves at a different rate than the soft subcutaneous tissue around them. And so what happens is, when you're under a microwave field or a directed energy weapon, those fillings absorb more energy, and they heat up a lot faster. And when they heat up, then the nerves in your teeth start hurting. It's just like, you bite Ice Cube Mike or something and your teeth hurt. Changes in temperature really set your nerves off in your mouth. So I always knew when we were operating around microwaves. And you got to be real careful if you're operating explosives in the area and you're using those standard M7 DuPont electric blasting caps. You have to be real careful keeping them shunted, because if they're operating these directed energy weapons, you'll have a secondary set-off on your explosions. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Secondary set-offs. All these technical terms, the exact makes and models of everything. Wow. I mean, this guy's crazy. Not crazy as in insane. It's so mind-shocking that he's delivering all this information, steadfast, calm, composed, not a single waver about anything. I mean, just very, very interesting. We're finishing up the interview now. It's almost over.
Listen, Cody, on an average year, how many black ops do you think are carried out that we're not aware of?
Astronomical numbers of them. I mean, it's huge. It's like an iceberg. You imagine yourself on the Titanic, and you're going across the North Atlantic at night, and you look and you see a little tip of an iceberg. Underneath it is a huge, huge shadow. I mean, it's impossible to calculate. For every one you hear about, there's probably thousands and thousands that you never hear about. There's a saying they got in the agency, and Chip probably knows it. Our failures you hear about, our successes you never do. That's Black Ops.
So, Cody, is there anything you want to say to people that are in the situation you used to be, that are now in a process of that they know inside them, in their heart and so on, that this is the time they need to do something? What would you recommend them to do in this process of possibly stepping forward?
Well, I asked Thomas Drake, that NSA whistleblower, the same thing, and he said get really good legal stuff. But the legal stuff is a joke, basically. When you're dealing in Black Ops, you're dealing with assassinations and murders and a lot of bad stuff. I did what I did for money. I was making a lot of money, and I was greedy and young and arrogant and egotistical, and I died twice in the hospital in 1991. They had to shock me back, and after that, I kind of had a spiritual awakening. But to other people that are out there, we all have to look in the mirror at the end of the day. I know so many veterans that are, they do drugs, they eat all the Prozac and all the crap the VA gives them. Everyone has PTSD. I know a lot of special forces guys and operators that they live like hermits and recluses. They're afraid to go out anywhere. They're highly paranoid. They can't go to the store. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was try to readapt to this civilian society. I mean, it was hard to go into Black Ops and get your mind tweaked around, but when you come back to this civilian world, I still haven't been able to do it. I still have trouble readapting to this. But I would say to those people, Ole and Mike, if it's your country that you love and it's freedom and truth that you honor, that maybe it's time to step forward and help expose some of this shadow government stuff and help expose some of this corruption. Because if we continue on this path with covert op after secret, politicians, the corruption, we're going to lose our world. We're going to end up in the New World Order bankers' hands. They're going to microchip our children like dogs, and we won't have any freedom. This is about spiritual light and the forces of darkness. And you've got to pick your side, which side you're going to be on. I flipped sides. I walked with the dark ones. And now I'm of the light. I chose the light. So everyone has to do their own thing. But if we don't have any light in this world, we're going to lose it. And we're going to end up on a prison planet.
Now, Cody, is your book published? Can people buy it?
No, we had to do everything opposite of the vanilla world. In a normal world, people go to publishers, they get their thing published, then they do interviews. Okay, if I had taken this book here and sent it for publication, they would have ratted me out to CIA or whoever, and no one would ever be hearing me now or see this book or the light of day. So what I did was I wrote it all first, then I started doing interviews like with Ole's help and stuff, and then we were about the publication later. And what we have now is a disc on CDs. It's approximately a 700-page book. It's 360 pages. And it's chock full of all kinds of stuff. And in the front of the book, I say that this book was not censored by the CIA's Publication Review Board, the PRB. I've got friends that were here that worked at the IG's office, the Inspector General's office at CIA, and they looked at the book and gave me advice and stuff ahead of time. And they said, if you sign a national security oath and you put stuff like this out, they're going to arrest you and throw you in Leavenworth. But I didn't sign any of that stuff. And so this book's a true Black Ops book. It's done without attorneys, and it's done without oversight, and it's what really happened out in the field, and we've been selling CD copies of it. We got a website coming up any day now, today, tomorrow, with a PDF file and a PayPal for people where they can get it, because we've had inquiries from around the world. And so this is the real deal here. A lot of guys like Chip Tatum, if he wrote a book and he signed a national security oath with CIA, or a point-specific oath to a particular mission, they're required as part of signing those oaths if they ever publish books in the future, like Valerie Plame Wilson did. You remember her?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she had to turn her book in to the CIA's Publication Review Board, and then they chop out all the good stuff and redact it and edit it and hide everything, and then what comes out in the wash is a watered-down piece of stuff that doesn't tell the real story. But see, they have no way to control me. That's why they offered me the job to bomb the Murrah building. I was a perfect cutout. I had no ties to the agency. I had no ties to the military. I had no ties to nothing. And so I'd just be a crazed criminal and a lone bomber. But that's why this book is important for people to get out. And we give free copies out to veterans. We've been getting a lot of guys in the Navy and older guys that are all beat up and messed up, and they're on Social Security and 30% disability and so forth. And we just send them books for free. And because it has a lot of information about Agent Orange and also about the depleted uranium and the anthrax vaccines with the squalene in them that was used in Desert Storm 1. It made a lot of our guys sick with the Gulf War syndrome. So,
Man, this guy knows everything about everything. I mean, he's kind of like Alex Jones, except he doesn't really rely on too many other people. He's got all the first-hand knowledge, supposedly.
We didn't get to cover that in this interview, but there's a tremendous amount of information that can help our veterans and help turn our country around if we can act on it. I hope Donald Trump can drain the swamp, so to speak, but it's a big thing we're up against. But if we don't fight it and stand up to this darkness somehow, we will lose our country.
To get a copy of the CD, Cody, do they email you, or how does that work?
Yeah. What they do is they email me, CodyGoldenElk. That's a weird name, Cody Golden Elk @yahoo.com. And then what we do is send them the information on how to get it. And we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of CD copies. And I've got all kinds of files. I got all kinds of things, Mike. I got my own counter surveillance pictures. I got tapes. I snuck tape recording equipment inside the United States Attorney's Office in the 10th Circuit. I tape recorded them inside there. No one's ever done that. We got it past their X-ray machines and everything. I've got stuff that no one's ever heard, but we've got dead man switches. So we've got them all around the world. I've got tapes, files, pictures, dates, all kinds of stuff. In the book, we had to limit it. It's only 362 sided pages, but it has a lot of good information in it.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you so much. Ole, thank you so much for bringing Cody onto the show. Really just a fascinating discussion, some really true insight into how the deep state, the shadow government operates. It's going to be an eye-opener for a lot of people. So thank you, guys, and I will have the show out as soon as...
So there you have it. Mind-shocking revelations here from Snodgres, one of the most incredible whistleblowers ever, if what he's saying is legit. So we got plenty more to come. This is just scratching the surface of the OKC event. If you want to help support the podcast, you can do it to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.